to tonight's meeting of the Port Phillip City Council. The City of Port Phillip respectfully acknowledges the Yalukit Willem clan of the Boonwurrung. We pay our respects to their elders, both past and present. We acknowledge and uphold their continuing relationship to this land. So it's great to see some people in the room with us. Tonight, everyone at home, we are welcoming back councillors, officers and members of the public into our lovely town hall, albeit under very strict conditions. Some officers and members of the public and community will continue to participate via the WebEx platform as we undertake a new hybrid style of meeting. So again, I say in advance, bear with us if there are any technological hiccups. This meeting is being streamed via Council's webcast page and Facebook Live. Whilst we operate in an online mode, there is always the risk of technical issues arising that will be beyond our control, and if we do experience any difficulties, we may adjourn the meeting for a short time to resolve. First item tonight is apologies. Councillors, do we have any apologies? Good news is that's a no. So number 2, the minutes of the previous council meetings. Councillors, the minutes of the meeting of the 2nd of December 2020 have been circulated. Are there any questions regarding these minutes? If not, can I have a motion to confirm these minutes? Councillor Baxter, seconded by Councillor Bond. I'm assuming you don't want to speak to the minutes at all? No, great. Let's put that to the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Does anyone have a conflict of interest in a matter being discussed at tonight's meeting?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I do.
Yes, would you like to speak to it?
It's relating to section 18.1, which I can talk to when we get to that.
Councillor Martin?
I'm on the board of the Bubba Woman Jekka Childcare Centre, and petition item 7.5 refers to that.
Thank you. So now we're at item number 4, which is the public question time and submissions. So our meeting processes have been altered via resolution of Council to hear all submissions from members of the public at the start of the meeting. And so we will hear now all of the public questions and any comment on upcoming items. All requests to speak were required to be submitted by 4 p.m. this afternoon. At the time of registering to speak, submitters were given the option to attend the meeting in person, join the WebEx meeting virtually and ask their questions live during the meeting, or to have an officer read out the statement on their behalf. So statements submitted by members of the public will be read in summary by an officer. So the first speaker this evening is I call upon Craig Eyes, who is submitting in person to Council a question. Thank you, Mr. Eyes. If you could state your name and suburb for the record.
Craig has turned the button on. So Craig Eyes from Powerhouse Rugby Club in Albert Park. So thank you. I have seen a few of the councillors last year. You might recall during 2020 that City of Port Phillip submitted 3 sports infrastructure grant applications in round 1 to the state government, $68 million fund, and all 3 were unsuccessful, including the Graham Street Skate Park, your own project that was, the Middle Park Bowls Club, and Powerhouse Rugby Club's Stan Bissett Pavilion. So in December 2020, we were anxiously awaiting the announcement of the round 2 of the sports infrastructure grants. So it was slipped out very quietly, $110 million, not much fanfare, and as it turns out, the City of Port Phillip have been excluded by the state government and not invited to submit any applications to fund sports infrastructure. And I found on the web a copy to the CEO of Moonee Valley Council. You know, you're kindly invited to submit your unsuccessful project from round 1 again for the J.A. Fullerton Pavilion, $6.5 million. So I'm thinking that's pretty tough on City of Port Phillip, missing out on sports infrastructure when we dearly need it. And 3 projects were unsuccessful in round 1. So for Powerhouse Rugby Club, at the moment our young females have to get changed on the sideline at Albert Park in full view of the public, as they practice on Tuesday and Thursdays and on game day on Saturday. It is the responsibility of all of us, the club, the council, councillors, state government, to create a safe and welcoming space for females, and it is not possible without fit-for-purpose change rooms. The Powerhouse Rugby Club has raised $1 million and has a shovel-ready project to construct female-friendly change rooms, and seeking $800,000 to start construction at a time when local jobs are required and people are encouraged to participate in sport. So, councillors, over the past 10 years since we introduced this project to City of Port Phillip, probably around $1.5 billion has passed through the council. We've asked several times for some funding. So far, nothing for the pavilion. So I appreciate that times are tough. It's tough for the council, tough for community groups, and funding has been constrained over the past year. So bearing that in mind, I'm even more surprised about the sports infrastructure grant process that has been launched by the state government. And I'm asking councillors, now that you're aware of being excluded from $110 million, what action can we take together to speak to local MPs, or the local MP, the Sports Minister, the Treasurer, the Premier, others, to raise this matter, which seems unequitable? And how will City of Port Phillip together support local sports infrastructure development by clubs? So those are my questions. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Eyes. Now, I do believe we have an officer, Anthony Trail, who might have a little bit more information for us to respond to that as a starting point. And I will take this moment. I did forget to emphasise to people who will be speaking, you have 3 minutes to do so. We will wrap you up as we get to that point. Thank you, Mr. Trail.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Mr Eyes is correct that there was a round 2 Sport and Recreation Victoria stimulus grant. City of Port Phillip had 3 applications in round 1. We were unsuccessful in that round. We were also not invited and provided that advice in writing. SRV had a range of factors that helped prioritise that when I contacted them recently. They highlighted the disadvantage, impact on bushfires and impact on COVID was their criteria to decide on those. We've written to the club through our Chief Executive Officer and offered to have a meeting with Sport and Rec Victoria and the club, and awaiting that response and happy to organise that.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is in person, and I call upon Leah Macy, who is speaking to item 7.1, the petition, requesting residents-only parking during certain times on Perrin Street, South Melbourne. If you could please state your name and suburb for the record. Oh, and press the button so we can hear you. Sorry.
Leah Macy, South Melbourne. Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillors. In addition to our case as outlined in our petition, we would like to make the following points. The area impacted by this petition is made up of over 35 homes, 50 plus residents, not including children, Cecil Street residents who also use parking spaces in Park Place who are not counted in this tally. Currently, only 22 parking spaces are potentially available for residents to park. 16 spaces on Perrin Street and 7 unrestricted spaces in Park Place, which are used by residents and businesses. I'll address the council report, and my neighbour Slav will address our residents and our requests. The validity of the report recommending no action has the following issues. Firstly, the petition as presented to Council incorrectly states our request for resident-only parking on Wednesdays after 5 p.m. instead of weekdays after 5 p.m. Secondly, the investigation was undertaken in January, a period of time significantly influenced in part by COVID conditions and the school holidays. The parking pressure problems will increase as life gets back to normal. Thirdly, the locale outlined in the petition currently has over 6 properties vacant, thus potentially 6 to 12 cars needing parking, not factored in the investigation. Fourth, the report states that Perrin Street was identified to parking officers as a place to frequent. However, they are rarely seen on the street. 5, significant disadvantage and impracticality in parking mainly occurs after 5 p.m. weekdays and on the weekends, when parking officers are unavailable to make a difference, and it can be impossible to gain a car park within reasonable access to our homes. 6, the neighbourhood zone identified in the report as available to residents counts parking in front of the South Melbourne Police Station, and however, these are for police vehicles only. It also counts parking in front of the library, which is commercial parking until 6 p.m. And the last point, the report does not address any solution for residents with ambulatory and medical issues that do not qualify for disability parking and residents with young children. Now I'll hand you over to Slav. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So next I call in person upon Slav Civicsi. Apologies about the pronunciation, if you can correct me, sir. For the same item 7.1, which is requesting residents only parking on Perrin Street. If you could state your name and suburb for the record.
Slav Civicic, South Melbourne, Perrin Street. I've just got some examples that impact residents. Resident A suffers from medical conditions. Her carer often has great difficulty in accessing parking near their home during work hours and on weekends. She has difficulty walking more than 75 metres. Her carer has parked in the half-hour parking spaces near their home in the past and received parking fines. Resident B is a single parent with 2 children. She experienced great difficulty parking close to her home after work and returning with her children and groceries. Resident C is a woman experiencing many medical issues. She has a living carer who experiences challenges in parking close to their home. In addition, she is visited by various community support workers. She has a visitor's permit. However, these visitors often find it impossible to access a suitable park. We do understand that parking must be available for visitors to access the local amenities of Emerald Hill and local businesses. We believe this would be aptly supported by the existing provision of 9 half-hour parking spaces in Perrin Street and 3 one-hour parking spaces near the police station. There is ample and available commercial parking spaces in Park and Bank Street which are underutilised. The commercial parking is only $2 per hour and will generate funds for the council. We respectfully request, 1, that the council support the implementation of residents parking only in Perrin Street after 5 p.m. on weekdays and all hours on weekends for at least the 13 car parks in front of the residents in Perrin Street, or 2, as an alternative, the council implement 50% of 7 parking spaces in front of residents in Perrin Street to residents only parking all day, every day, and the remaining 6 parking spaces to be residential only after 5 on weekdays and all hours on the weekend. Or 3, either option 1 or 2 implemented as a trial and the impacts of parking and visitors to the area is monitored. Both options must include regular monitoring by parking officers during the weekdays and weekends. These actions would significantly enhance residents access to parking in reasonable distance to their homes and improve well-being of livability. Failing that, we respectfully request another investigation into the issue, which includes resident consultation and a review under normal conditions that may be more reflective of how the parking and streets are used. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I now call upon John Boomsma, who is speaking to item 7.2, which is a petition regarding noise and issues at Flower Child in Shakespeare Grove, St Kilda. So if you could press the button on the mic and then state your name and suburb and then speak for 3 minutes. Thank you.
John Boomsma, St Kilda. Dear councillors and council officers, I have a number of hats tonight. I'm both the building manager for Shakespeare Grove and Chaucer Street, it's on the corner.
Just press the button again, sir. It seems to have gone.
Okay. Yes, I mentioned building manager for the whole apartment, which covers both the residential and the retail on the ground floor. I'm the chair of the Owners Corporation, and I'm also an owner-tenant in the building. I've lived in the area for more than 25 years and actively involved in many community activities, like a member of VegArt, and I'm also the facilitator and group leader of the St Kilda Prostate Cancer Support Group, where we meet at the St Kilda RSL. I'd like to begin by saying that I wholeheartedly support the concept of live, love, local. I think I've got the right order there. Given the impact that COVID-19 has had on businesses. And in fact, I was a regular takeaway patron of the Flower Child during the lockdown. However, not to the extent when one venue has such a negative impact on 6 other struggling businesses, as well as the amenity of 40 or so residents. I won't repeat all of the fairly lengthy detail in the petition, and one of the reasons why it is so lengthy is because it impacts on so many different people in different ways, so we had to try and cover all of that. But if I summarise some of the key points, it's my understanding that they have a cafe restaurant licence, and that only permits background noise essentially during eating. Yet that's not how it's run. It's clearly run as a nightclub, and some of you will have seen the video that I sent, which was made by them and highlights the loud music and the dancing. They pump out very loud techno doof music, for want of a better word, often till 2-3 a.m. And because of the heavy bass, and I really need to stress that, it's the bass component that causes the issues, not just pure volume, and that penetrates our double glazed windows. It's not as if the building isn't sort of designed to deal with noise, given where it's located, but this has very little effect. And that's probably one of the reasons being is that it's the perimeter of the Flower Child is only 15 metres away from the apartment building, so it's very close. And the unrelenting beat of that type of music keeps many of the tenants awake at night. Some have already been forced to pay for alternative accommodation and on bad nights just to get some sleep, and I know of others who are already looking to move, which is really pretty unfortunate as an outcome. The same sound also has an impact on the 2 restaurants directly below, destroying their ambience while their customers try to have a meal. And numerous customers I've spoken to have said they won't be coming back again because of that noise coming from above them. We've documented numerous examples of various people trying to communicate with the owner or the manager, to no avail. Either they don't respond or they say they'll do one thing and then do another. We would much rather try to negotiate and find a way where everyone can coexist, but they just don't seem interested.
Sir, I will have to ask you to come to the end because your 3 minutes is up. Sorry.
I know the second speaker is a lot shorter, if that helps any. It's in stark contrast, for example, with the Vineyard, who has had noise issues, but we've been able to talk it through and come up with a way of making it work for everyone. The other issue is the parklet. It's located on council land in a car park adjoining O'Donnell Gardens. The worst problem here is the noisy generator that just runs constantly to power their fridges. Again, disturbs. It's directly underneath all of the apartments and bedrooms and living rooms. They promised to put a sound deadening cover over it. It hasn't happened.
Thank you, sir. I know that your other speaker isn't here, but I still have to allow you 3 minutes, just like everyone else. Sorry.
Sure.
So if you could wrap it up, please.
Can I perhaps just finish the last line being basically, we love this in Kilda area and believe in advocating for the happy coexistence of both retail and local residents, and this is not the way to go about it, and we really seek Council's assistance to find an amicable compromise or solution. Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Could I ask
a
this
question?
now's not the time. It's just receiving submissions. Sorry.
Point of order. This is public submissions to the reports. Is that correct? But there are points being made in relation to reports, correct? So under that basis, it's not public question time. Therefore, the previous tradition, albeit is not covered in the local law, would be to allow councillors to ask a question of the person speaking.
So can I just check, because we are under different meeting methods, so I wouldn't want to...
Yes, we can allow a clarifying question on
Okay.
matter,
Okay, so we can allow a clarifying question. Is it a clarifying question, Councillor Clark? If it's debate around the issue, we'll have to save that to the time that the petition is received.
So I just wanted to clarify, was the commercial properties built at the same time as the residential, or have they come after the residential section of your building? And the second part of that is, was there another commercial business in that cafe area where Flower Child is and it's subsequently changed? Thanks.
When the building was built, or rebuilt effectively, it's on the second level, was a real estate agency, and that's what it was until quite recently. It wasn't used as a restaurant or a nightclub at all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I'll call upon Jane Russell now, who is speaking to the same item, 7.2, the petition regarding noise and issues at Flower Child. And Jane is in person. If you could turn on the microphone and say your name and suburb, and you've got 3 minutes.
I hope that's on. My name's Jane Russell and I live in St Kilda. I've lived in Port Phillip for the past 25 years. I'm also working from home as a research consultant. My apartment is in the Shakespeare Grove apartment complex with 40 plus residents and 3 retail businesses, and I'm a signatory on the petition. For the past 12 weeks or so, since lockdown stopped-ish, I've been seriously impacted by the operations of the Flower Child because of the relentless noise, one of the generator during the day as a result of the parklet that's right under my lounge room and bedroom window. That doesn't bother me at bedtime, but just during the day. And that goes relentlessly from any time from 12 till about 11 and one night 11:30 at night. And also the excessive techno-type music noise into the early hours of the morning, which does penetrate my bedroom, so I can't sleep. This has impeded my concentration, my capacity to work, and has interfered with sleep until up to 3 a.m. on Friday and Saturday nights. Together with the lack of communication and unknown scheduling of operations, when they're going to have these events or not, my health has been impacted. Unfortunately, a broad range of others invested in the Shakespeare Grove Ackland Street precinct have also been negatively impacted, and this is demonstrated by the 30 signatories to the petition, and they include 18 residents in our apartment block, 2 retail business owners at the bottom of our apartment block, 3 owners of other businesses on Ackland Shakespeare precinct, and 7 St Kilda residents who visit these businesses, including President of Veg Out and committee members. I love St Kilda, it's my home, it's where my friends and my support networks are, and I'm fearful that this will not be resolved unless some pressure is brought to bear on this operation around regulations. So that's why I've been compelled to come here today. I'd also like to thank the Council for recognising our concerns. I really appreciate that. The Council officers and staff for their professional approach and for treating me with respect and for the opportunity to be heard today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
I now call upon Gary Mink speaking to the same item 7.2. Again, if you could please turn the button on, press the button and say your name, and then 3 minutes is yours.
My name is Gary Mink. I own a business that is affected by this petition downstairs. I actually had not expected to speak, but given that 3 minutes is kind of short and I realize not all the issues was covered, I just want to add that on a broader basis, the parklet, I feel, is in breach of a number of council-regulated issues when it comes to parking, when it comes to how many parking spots they were allowed to actually use, and that's in the full report. I would also like to say that I think there's a basic safety issue here. We've got what is in essence a bar in a parking lot with the exit in that parking lot. I've seen on numerous occasions traffic jams caused by people passing each other. There's really not enough room between the parked cars across from the parklet and the parklet itself for 2 cars to pass and pedestrians to walk forward. So it does create sort of a little bit of, a little bit of a jam between the cars. I've also seen people struggle to park there because there's just not enough room. It's already a pretty tight parking space, and I've seen people struggle with parking, which again causes a traffic jam. And again, I think noise is obviously an issue, but safety I think is a bigger issue. My business itself has also been impacted on an intangible basis. We've lost our vista, which our customers enjoy. On a more tangible basis, we've had my staff complain that people who are sitting in the parklet will come over, walk through our restaurant and use our restrooms, which are actually under code and is available only for our customers. They'll walk in, they won't say a word, they'll just go to the back. So obviously somebody has disclosed that code to somebody in the parklet. So really all I wanted to add to this was it's not just a noise issue, it is a, look, the parklet's in the wrong spot. I understand what Council is doing, trying to stimulate business, and I appreciate it. I wish I could do the same, but I can't. But in this case, this parklet was put there under pretenses that I don't think were fully disclosed, causes a safety issue, a noise issue, and also influences the customers in my business. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, would Dennis Jones approach the microphone, press the button, speak to 7.4, which is a petition regarding dangerous hoon driving and vehicle noise in the city of Port Phillip, and if you could state your name and suburb for the record.
You pressed it already. Thank you to the Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillors for the opportunity. My name is Dennis Jones. I've lived in Port Melbourne for 20 years, Albert Park for 20 years prior to that. I'd like to speak to Council about the hooning, dangerous driving problem that we have in the area. I'd also like to ask if councillors have seen the videos that were sent around. Can you raise your hands if you have? Okay. Well, having seen those videos, which are extraordinary to say the least, and probably other people here have seen the example in St Kilda 2 weeks ago. I think it was on the 22nd. Having seen the videos, you probably agree with me that it's only a matter of time before innocent people in this area are killed or seriously injured. We've been lucky to date. This dangerous, senseless driving, far too many people have died around Australia in the last 12 months and in recent weeks. It's just extraordinary that it continues. I'd like to ask this question, and forgive me for being emotional, but it is an emotive issue. How would we all feel after the next senseless death if it occurs in the city of Port Phillip? I appreciate things are being done, but how would we feel if in fact we haven't done as much as we can to prevent that occurring? However, on a positive note, some progress has been made recently since this became a real issue around 2-3 months ago. I'd like to acknowledge Councillors Heather Consolo, Peter Martin, Marcus Pearl, Mayor Crawford, plus Bill and Eddie from BCNA, and Police Inspector Helen Chugg, and all members of our Road Safety Committee, won't name them all, for progress that has been made. The installation of the mobile camera on Station Pier, not just a Station Pier issue, but I'll talk to that briefly. That camera plus fixed cameras, that initiative certainly has an impact, and police being more proactive. Hooning has been reduced quite markedly in the last 2 weeks, although the weather has been a little inclement, so maybe that's a factor. A hooning event that was planned for Station Pier, specifically last Saturday night, was picked up by our members. Police advised, police contacted the organisers, and that organisation, they were relocated to Essendon Fields. Congratulations, Essendon, by the organisers at the last minute. They were advised of a police blitz in this area, and that was very effective. So further action is required, though. It seems to me that we can't ask the police to do this job. I mean, if you saw what happened in St Kilda on the 22nd when police turned up and were pelted with bottles and other missiles, I think it's most unfair for us to ask them to do the job without helping them. I think the police need to be helped by technology in particular, high-definition cameras in all the hotspots, Station Pier included. There's a whole list of other issues which are in the petition. I won't mention them at this stage because I'm probably out of time. What I'd like to say in conclusion is that a speeding, out-of-control car, and we've all seen this on television, or motorbike, is as dangerous as a gun in the wrong hands, potentially more dangerous. Hopefully the action we now take prevents further senseless death and injury in our community. Sadly, it often takes tragic loss of innocent lives to expedite permanent change. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Jones. Could I please get Tim Norman in person? We actually have 2 Tim Normans speaking tonight, but this is the one who is in the room to speak to 7.4, which is the petition regarding dangerous hooning. If you could state your name and suburb, sir.
Yes, my name is Tim Norman, and I'm also a resident of Port Melbourne for over 20 years. I'm very much aligned with Dennis. Dennis spoke primarily on the issue of hoon driving. I'm going to speak to you on the issue of noise and noise related to that. And they're related and interwoven. First, a few definitions, if I can. One is that quiet enjoyment is the right of a property owner or a tenant to enjoy his or her property in peace without interference. And as tenants or owners, we're entitled to protection from nuisance from substantial and unreasonable interference. And for those of you who may know, nuisance includes a range of things, including noise. Now, turning my attention to that, I'll give you a definition of noise as per the EPA, and that is noise pollution is sound at a level that's annoying, distracting, or harmful to a person's well-being. And now turning my attention specifically to vehicular noise, and specifically cars and motorcycles, because that's what we're talking about here. You may know that the EPA has imposed noise limits. Well, the EPA acknowledges noise limits that vary, and obviously those are not something within your control. But one of the things I'd like to do is challenge you and challenge ourselves as both residents and members of this community to consider whether those noise limits are still relevant. In fact, whether I think they're too high. In fact, I think they should be lower. And to give you an idea, noise limit on a motorcycle is at 100 decibels. For those of you who may know this, a lawnmower, standing beside a lawnmower is something akin to that. And so we're dealing here with noise that's similar to that, standing beside a lawnmower for a period of time. If I can turn my attention to a couple of other things. One of the things that we have within our community is that there's a large petition that's been circulated. It currently has well over 850 signatories, and I have a few comments from signatories of that. And just let me read a couple to you. One from Peter. It says, despite many calls to police for assistance re loud and persistent car motorbike noise on Beach Street, Port Melbourne, nothing has been done to ameliorate the situation. I cannot believe that the speed and noise is legal and feel that a regular presence would be enough to prevent the hoon behaviour. And a second one from Taryn. We live on Prohaski Street in Port Melbourne. The amount of hooning, drag racing and noise from motorbikes is unbearable. And a third, finally, from Roizen. I'm sick of cars and motorbike groups using Beach Road as a drag race. So, just to help summarize things, if I can turn my attention to what we're asking, we note the council officers' comments and recommendations. We'd like to add to that, so we ask whatever you approve on that they be made more specific. Specifically for the police, that they increase patrols, etc. We ask that our group be advised, perhaps through the Gateway Award councillors, of the results of those patrols so that we can monitor progress and advise our stakeholders, which are numbering now over 1,000. And council officers will continue to meet with Victoria Police, etc. This is again the recommendations. And we'd ask that council actively investigate a council-owned portable CCTV, and they work with the Department of Transport to investigate an acoustic camera.
So you have reached the end of your 3 minutes, so could you wrap it up, please?
I will. One more sentence, if I may. And the council offers assistance for joint operations between Victoria Police and Department of Transport. We ask again if we can be advised of progress in that, because we are representing a substantial number of residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Now we're going to the virtual speakers on the WebEx, and it's with much pleasure I call on former or previous Mayor Bernadine Voss, who is speaking to item 7.5, the petition requesting to reduce the significant risk of a child being hit on Liade Street, Port Melbourne, by vehicles. Bernadine, are you there?
Yes, thank you. Bernadine Voss, Port Melbourne.
Oh, I didn't even have to ask.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak with you this evening, and it is lovely to be on the other side of these meetings. As some of you will be aware, I've served for 6 years on the Bubup Womanjeka Family and Children's Centre Board as the councillor representative, and this has recently been taken over by Councillor Martin, of which the board is very grateful, and thank you. I still remain on the board, and as directed by the board, this petition was executed. It was online for under a week, so it could be presented at this evening's meeting. The wider community of this area is very concerned with the risk that vehicles may hit a child in the near future. These concerns have been validated. We've had an independent consultant review and also rate the risk as extreme. There are too many unmitigated risks and variables that contribute to this ticking time bomb. I'd like to emphasise that where possible, Bubup Womanjeka has done what it can to mitigate the risk, such as educating parents, initially certainly installing large garden boxes at the entrance and the exits of the building, However, at the end of the day, the obscurity of the centre amongst the lovely parklands, combined with babies and prams, toddlers, kids on bikes and scooters, dogs, and along with the bus and the vehicles, it is very chaotic. Liade Street has significantly increased in traffic volumes, as evidenced by Council's traffic counts, and behaviours have also changed. For example, there are many more U-turns in front of the centre than has ever occurred. The Unofficial Pedestrian Crossing at Crookshank Street and Liade Street is very busy with children and parents and dogs and owners, especially in the mornings and late afternoons. I know this as a frequent user and observer, as this is my street. This needs resolving immediately. Over the years, this has been raised numerous times with council officers. It's not a new request, but one that's been in planning for 8 years, since Lagoon Reserve Plan was started. A Wombat Crossing, that's a raised crossing, would solve many of the concerns. For example, it would slow vehicles. It would reduce the quick accelerations that we see very regularly. It would warn drivers. It would provide a safe crossing. It would prioritise the vulnerable, the pedestrians, and it would mitigate the risks so that we can all sleep easy at night. Councillors, I'm actually comfortable with the officer's recommendation that's before you tonight, but I respectfully request that you please prioritise budget for this risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadine. Also on WebEx, I now call upon the other Tim Norman, speaking to item 7.5, the petition requesting to reduce the significant risk of a child being hit on Liade Street, Port Melbourne. Are you there, Tim?
Yes, I am. Thank you. It's Tim Norman in Port Melbourne.
Great. If you would make your statement then, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this agenda item and receive our petition. I'm the convener of the Risk Committee at the Wombat Family Centre and also the parent of a 4-year-old child and a resident of the City of Port Phillip for the last 5 years. I think we all agree that the safety of our children, the families and our communities is a core value for all of us, and I thank the Council for their work and engagement on this issue so far. As Bernadine has said, we note the Council report, and this issue is raised well before the September 2020 date indicated in the current papers. The risk of a vehicle colliding with a child was raised to our attention in January of 2020 by an independent risk expert, and we are going through the process of making sure that we have all taken as many steps as we can to mitigate that risk. Commenting on the Council's officers' reports, I'm respectfully calling for more urgent action to mitigate this risk, including that Council accelerate the proposed timeline for developing the so-called Wombat Crossing, including the engagement with the Department of Transport and the community more broadly. Currently it is set down for an update to Council in June of 2021 this year. That Council allocate adequate funding for those proposed works to be completed very promptly, and in the interim improve the visibility of the existing 40 km/h speed signage, improve signage to indicate and alert drivers to the fact that there are children and young families in the area, and investigate additional measures to slow down traffic such as rumble strips or speed bumps. We'll of course defer to the expertise of Council to determine the best solution there. Thank you very much to the Council for their engagement on this issue. We look forward to continuing to work with you and all stakeholders to reduce the risk and improve safety for all residents. Thank you for the opportunity to be heard this evening.
Thank you, Tim. I believe we're going back to in person. I call upon Andrew Forte speaking to item 14.3, the intention to sell 39 to 47 Camden Street, Balaclava, the reporting of the submissions in response to the public notice. If you could state your name and suburb then, sir.
Andrew Forte, Balaclava. Councillors, thank you for the opportunity tonight to talk to you. In response to Council's notice of intention to sell 3749 Camden Street, Balaclava, known as the Woolworths car park, received on the 5th of December 2020. I would like to formalise our strong interest in acquiring this land. I, Andrew Forty of PDS Group, represent the owners, GLG Investments and the Hertzberg family, who have jointly owned properties in the area for 30 plus years and are the owners of the Coles car park site and adjoining site land parcels, as well as land parcels adjacent to and adjoining directly the Woolworths car park site on Camden Street. Plans are currently underway for a master plan redevelopment of the Coles car park sites, which will include the restoration of the Carlisle Street retail shops, new commercial community spaces, residential apartments and new public reserve. It is being created to respond to Council's current objectives for the Balaclava Retail Renewal Precinct. We have appointed Woods Bagot Architects to lead the master plan design for this exciting new project, and are looking forward to sharing our draft plans with the City of Port Phillip's Planning and Property departments later this week. We have also appointed leading town planners and urban planners to assist and help achieve our vision for the project. Collectively and with Council, we look forward to providing Council a broad and comprehensive master plan for the entire precinct, inclusive of the Woolworths car park and abutting Carlisle Street retail shops. We regard the inclusion of the Woolworths car park site into this master plan as a very significant and very important part of the overall vision and renewal of the retail precinct. Furthermore, we firmly believe the inclusion would result in the best eventual outcome and revitalisation of Carlisle Street, the retail precinct and the community at whole and its stakeholders. It's our understanding that Council intends to offer the land for sale via public auction or an expression of interest campaign later this year. Before this happens, we'd like the opportunity to negotiate directly with Council on the acquisition of the land, given its strategic value and structure, value to the structure and master plan that is currently underway. Broadening the area of the master plan would include the Woolworths car park would achieve the following tangible outcomes for the community, businesses and the users of the Carlisle Street retail shops who use them on a daily basis. It will provide a resolved, consolidated and comprehensive approach to the renewal of the entire retail precinct. It will provide an opportunity to deliver 2 full-line supermarkets, which is consistent with Council's current objectives. Currently, the Woolworths is a smaller, underperforming store. A development of the Woolworths car park can be delivered in an ordered and well-considered manner, either concurrently or over multiple stages alongside the development of the Coles car park and abutting sites, with the ability to effectively fast-track the revitalisation of the Carlisle Street retail precinct. It has the potential to allow, plan for and promote better pedestrian flow in and around the sites. It will allow for a better and more coordinated community amenity offering if the development components are delivered by a singular or one developer. Further, if another developer acquires the site, they are far less likely to give the same consideration to the precinct renewal plan as a whole if the land is developed in isolation.
Sir, if you could just come to the end.
Yep. We will welcome the opportunity to present this proposal to councillors and other council stakeholders in greater detail to demonstrate our further reasons why this is the best option for council. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight. Good evening.
Thank you. Now I'm just checking. We have Michael Sabata, who is going to speak in person to the Library Action Plan, which is item 14.1. Oh, you've made it, sir? Okay, great. If you could come up and state your name and suburb, please.
Michael Sabata, resident of South Melbourne. Regarding the Library Action Plan and the proposal for consultation on the draft plan, my first point is I don't believe sufficient time is allowed considering the current circumstances for proper consultation on the plan, and also that the proposed methods are the standard means of consultation, which I think in the current circumstances is not going to lead to an appropriate level of feedback on what perhaps are going to be significant changes to library service. And I say perhaps because the clarity in the plan with respect to the changes, to put it vague is perhaps putting it kindly. The best indicators on page 10 of the plan, the page that's entitled "What Can You Expect from Our Libraries in 2026?" But even this is sorely lacking in clarity beyond the fact that the St Kilda Library is to be redeveloped. And examples are, there's reference to 24/7 branch, but no clear indication of the service to be provided. For example, Middle Park Library is to be changed to 24/7 branch, and it's stated that it's going to deliver increased access to collection and spaces. It's very hard to square up how these things are meant to work, and I'm going to give a few more examples, and that lack of clarity is why I don't believe the Council's standard consultation process is going to be sufficient for you to receive any sensible feedback on the changes. Another example is the changes envisioned for service delivery to Emerald Hill Library is quote, "a place for storytelling and gaming." It's not clear what impact, if any, to the current service delivery. I should say, when I say current, the service is less than half in terms of access to the building. You can't use the public meeting room, etc. But talking about the way things stood in 2019, compared to that level of service, it's not clear what's to change. Nor does the plan provide any significant justification for investing more resources in the St Kilda Library. And it seems odd because the report is fundamentally based on the fact that the city's population is going to grow considerably, and it's at the other end of the municipality. And on that basis, I believe that both the time allowed for consultation and the methods of consultation need to be expanded, and clarity needs to be given if you're expecting any sensible response from the users of the library service and the residents who are going to pay for the library service to make any sensible response to the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. We have received a further 2 submissions that will be read out on behalf of the member of the public. So I'm going to call the name of each member of the public and refer to the Head of Governance to read a summary of the submissions. So we have Adrian Jackson.
Through you, Mayor, Adrian Jackson submits, how many portraits of Queen Elizabeth are held by Port Phillip City Council? Where are they held, and are they displayed in the Town Hall, libraries and other council buildings? If not, why have they been removed?
Sorry, Ms Bennett, I believe you have a response.
I do. Through you, Mayor, Council owns 4 reproduction portraits of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. 2 are dated from the 1950s and are in the Port Phillip City Collection and have had civic use previously in town halls. The other 2 are contemporary official portraits which are required and are used for citizenship ceremonies. They're also used for other civic events as needed. I've been advised that there is no record of when or why portraits of the Queen were removed from the council buildings, only that this occurred some years ago under a previous council.
Thank you. This one is from Kelly Connor speaking to item 7.5, which is the petition requesting to reduce the significant risk of a child being hit in Port Melbourne.
Through you, Mayor, Kelly Connor's submission reads, Wombat Crossing Family and Children's Centre underwent an external risk assessment at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. One of the risks identified by the external assessor was road safety on Liade Street, and in particular directly outside the centre. I have been actively communicating with the transport engineers and transport safety engineering team about possible road safety measures on Liade Street since March 11, 2020.
The road safety measures that have been requested are the installation of a Wombat Crossing from Lagoon Reserve to Edwards Park to further slow vehicles, give priority to pedestrians crossing and enhance driver awareness of the sensitive area, road stencils indicating children are in the immediate vicinity at our own expense, and additional children warning signs on Liade Street. The advice we have received is that a Wombat Crossing is an appropriate measure to reduce speed and improve pedestrian safety and amenity. However, there is no funding available this financial year. We have been advised that the request for the use of road stencils is not supported. I would like to thank the Transport Engineers and Transport Safety Engineering team for reviewing our requests and for installing additional children warning signs on Liade Street. We regularly and consistently educate our families about the road safety risks on the street. Unfortunately, the road safety measures that have been put in place along Liade Street have not sufficiently mitigated the risk. As we are a family and children's centre, the safety of our children and families is of utmost importance to us. We request that the City of Port Phillip prioritise the installation of a Wombat Crossing so we can support the safety of our children and families. As an alternative, in the meantime, the installation of rumble strips and road stencils would assist to reduce the road safety risks along Liade Street. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. So that was the last of our submissions. So now we're going to move to councillor question time. Councillors, does anyone have any questions from the officers? Councillor Pearl.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wondering if we can get an update on the restoration of the lamp on the corner of Lawn Street, if possible. Council's been looking about this for about 2 years now. Just, I think it's at the back of the Pullman Hotel.
Through you, Mayor, would take that one on notice.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Pearl.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. The Robocop installation by Victoria Police, as detailed before, seemed to have had an instant impact on reducing antisocial activities at Waterfront Place recently, albeit it was only in place for a very short period of time and on loan, so as I understand it, from the City of Stonington. My question is, has the City of Port Phillip considered purchasing these units for our local police teams, and what would be the estimated cost?
I believe Anthony Trail can respond to this question.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the approximate cost of a portable CCTV camera is about $100,000. There is a community safety grant that is currently advertised and closes in March. We have identified that as an opportunity where we can put in a submission to acquire one of those and operate in partnership with Victoria Police, who are supportive of that concept.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Pearl.
And Mr Trail might want us to just stay where he is for a minute. Just in relation to the public question time around the powerhouse funding, I wasn't aware that the club had raised $1 million, and congratulations to you for doing that. That's a huge effort for a community sporting club. Obviously, there's a lot of layers of bureaucracy and governance across the area where the club is located, between the state government, the club, and to some extent ourselves. What efforts has the City of Port Phillip made over the 10-year period, as indicated, that the club has been lobbying us and the state government? What assistance has the City of Port Phillip provided the club to expedite their ambition to build what sounds like a very admirable project?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the project is a worthy project, and we have supported it through applications. We support it with our advocacy to Parks Victoria, who are the land manager. Part of the $1 million is already state funding that is built to the project and needs to be acquired. So there has been advocacy and support along the way, and we're happy to continue. It is a club that runs good programs with females, juniors, people with all abilities, so we're happy to continue to support that project.
Thank you. Councillor, is there any further? Councillor Bond.
So you might want to stay there, Anthony. In 2018, Parks Victoria were given $5 million by the state government to spend on community sporting infrastructure within Albert Park Reserve. Have Parks Victoria indicated what that money will be spent on, or is it still, for all intents and purposes, sitting in a Parks Victoria bank account waiting to be spent?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll report back to the community and councillors and take that on notice to be 100% factual, but it will be in relation to the master plan, so we'll give factual information through taking the question on notice.
Thank you. Any further questions? Great. We'll move on to the next item, which is the sealing schedule, but we have no items for sealing on tonight's agenda. So we shall move to section 7, or item 7, which is petitions and joint letters. So we have 5 petitions on tonight's agenda. So we will be starting, which would make sense, with 7.1, which is the petition requesting residents-only parking during certain times on Perrin Street, South Melbourne. So, councillors, do we have any questions of the officers in relation to this report? Councillor Pearl. So I think we're referring to Brian T for these, but Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Just a question around the installation of the pop-up retail zone due to be ending at April 30. Is it envisaged by council that the installation will be removed by April 30, or is it likely that a permit will be submitted and the installation is likely to stay there post April 30?
Is that for Brian or from Peter?
I'll attempt. I might ask Lauren Bilkow if she's here to help with this. My understanding is that through you, Mayor, council officers are working on a policy that will be brought back to council on the extension of permits and future basis of those permits going forward. So no decision has been made in terms of any extension at this stage, and there'll be a paper and report back brought to council with policy recommendations around the extensions of those sorts of parklets between now and hopefully the end of March.
Any further? Are there other questions on the report? Councillor Martin.
Madam Mayor, we've heard the petitioners raise some concerns about the council officers' recommendations, and a couple of the councillors and I met with some of the local residents and they raised their concerns personally with me. I have 2 questions. Firstly, the petitioners are seeking a review of the council officers' recommendations. What would be the amount of time, council officers' time, that would go into any such review? And I'd be interested in whether the council officers believe that such a review would lead to a different outcome. And secondly, if we accept the petitioners' recommendations, does this set precedents for other areas in the municipality, and what additional requests for alteration to parking permits are we likely to get?
Brian?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. Thank you for the question. Any review, the time would depend, of course, on the matters that are being reviewed. The difficulty that we've got here is that we've got very limited parking in the area and extensive demand from not just the residents but from the local commercial interests. Having heard the questions, I think that some of the suggestions that were made were very constructive, and they are certainly things that I'd like to take on board and meet with those community members and see if we can work through some of those issues. I've, for example, heard that we might be able to increase the number of parking by moving some of our parking signs, and again, that's something that came through today that I'll be very happy to have a look at and work through with the residents. I don't want to raise any expectations because of the demands of parking in there, but if we can increase, if we can do something there, we're very happy to have a look at it.
The second question then was, would this be set a precedent then, Brian, for the rest of the municipality around activity centres and the pressures on parking?
I think if we were looking at changing making it a residents-only parking area, that would set a precedent, we struggle to do that because of the precedent, and we need to engage very broadly with the community. In terms of the resourcing and the review time, that would be extensive because we would set a precedent across all of these areas where we've got retail and commercial areas, and we want to engage extensively to get the balance right. But I think if we look at it in a more micro sense, just at that street and some of those ideas there, that would not take as much of council officer time or council resources.
Councillors, Councillor Bond.
Was a parking survey done of this local area in order to prepare this response? And if so, when was that survey conducted? I ask because the period we've been considering this has been, I'd suggest unusually quiet in this area. Usually it's quite a busy area, but because of January, a lot of people are away, a lot of businesses in that area are closed, other offices in that area, people are working from home, schools have been closed, etc, etc, etc. There's nothing happening at the South Melbourne Town Hall. So okay. Have we conducted analysis of this particular area during what would be an unusually quiet period in order to determine our response?
Is that the question?
Yeah. I'm just wondering if we did the same analysis in about 4 weeks' time, once the schools are back and shops are back and offices are back, would our analysis show a different result to what, and would our decision be different based on what we would observe in about 3 or 4 weeks' time?
Brian?
We have not conducted a parking survey. We have, I think, assumed at face value that parking in that area is difficult to access, and that the competing demands there, I think, would be. I'm confident that they are that there are competing demands. So, and that a parking survey would reveal that. But again, if councillors wanted us to, we could undertake that parking survey.
I have a question, if I might, Brian. I guess I know this street, but I can't imagine or can't quite think of how many car spaces are actually there on Perrin Street, roughly.
My estimate, I think, is about 16 car spaces, but that's the note I've got. I'm not sure if that's in this street, but it's around that number.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the officers? Councillor Sirikoff.
I'd like to ask also if those parking spaces have been reduced by the parklet there, and by how many spaces?
Brian, how many spaces?
The parklet is not on Perrin Street. It is on the nearby street, and 4 parking spaces have been taken for the parklet.
Sorry, can you clarify that, please? Did you say a parklet isn't on Perrin Street?
That's my understanding, yes.
I have seen a parklet on Perrin Street which takes up somewhere between 4 to 6 car spaces.
Let me just give me a moment. I'll just check
we'll just get this.
See if I've got any information, but
it's in the report.
Yes, I'm just checking through the report.
Peter might be able to add something to
Through you, Mayor, I think there's a diagram in the report that shows 4 parking spaces outside a restaurant on Perrin Street between Park Place and Park Street. Is that diagram correct, I think is the question, Brian?
Yes, it is correct, and the information I've got here from it now is yes, the parklet is on Perrin Street.
I've got a question, if I may. Do we know, Brian, and it may not be a question on notice, but do any of the houses have off-street parking that they're not utilising through either alleyways? And how many houses or actual properties are there in that small strip?
As I've indicated, we haven't done a parking survey, so we're not aware of whether or not there are any underutilised parking bays in the street.
Are there any further questions, councillors? Councillors, we have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Sirikoff.
Mayor, I would like to put forward an alternative motion.
Yep, great. Would you just, would you like to read out that motion?
1, receives and notes the petition. 2, requests council officers to further discuss with councillors opportunities to change parking restrictions on Perrin Street. Requests that council officers review parking on Perrin Street to see if parking can be increased by relocating parking signs where possible. 4, requests that council officers review the frequency of the enforcement of parking restrictions in Perrin Street and advise councillors of the outcome of this review.
Okay, thank you. So we've got, so Councillor Sirikoff has moved it. Do I have a seconder for the motion?
Happy to second.
Councillor Pearl. Councillor Sirikoff, would you like to speak to your alternative motion?
Yes, I would. Thank you. I visited a residence there yesterday, and I've been in that area quite frequently. I'd like to point out that Perrin Street is flanked by Bank Street and Park Street. Unfortunately, the map of car spaces supplied to councillors for Bank Street outside the police station shows that there are 16 spaces available for residents, but unfortunately these are taken up by police vehicles, so these spaces aren't available to the residents. So that narrows down the available of parking. Residents, as earlier said, residents inform me that 6 properties are vacant in Perrin Street. So when life is back to normal, and I hope that's very, very soon, these properties will once again be occupied, and so there will be pressure on parking spaces for residents who, I will add, have purchased parking permits, but they're having difficulties still parking in their own front of their own homes because it's basically after 6 o'clock. It's free parking for any length of time you wish to park there. Also like to note that when I was there around 6 o'clock last night, there were very few cars parked in Park Street, and which is free parking after 6 p.m. So with visitors to restaurants and cafes in the area in the evening, they're using Perrin Street, which is really where all the houses are that concerns the residents. So visitors should be using parking bays on Park Street or on Bank Street to reduce the pressure of available spaces to residents in Perrin Street. Also on Perrin Street, it was noted that there are a number of available car spaces which used to be available to residents as car spaces, but somehow they've been left out and not available for cars to park on that street. So I think the council's got an opportunity to reinstate about 2 or 3 car spaces to reduce the pressure for those homes. So I think it'd be a great opportunity if traffic engineers with councillors could have a look at the area to reinstate those spaces, which are basically sitting there empty only because there are parking signs which don't allow you to park in those spaces.
Thank you, Councillor Sirikoff. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Sirikoff, for putting the alt motion. And it's my pleasure to support you in that effort. Thank you also to the petitioners that came here this evening and also signed this. This petition was originally submitted to Council in December, and I've had some insight in terms of just how hard those petitioners have had to work to get through the Council system just to get this petition heard here this evening, which in some cases was disappointing, but it's also a testament to the persistence and level of support that the petitioners had gained to bring it to Council this evening. I should have asked a question during question time, which has only just occurred to me, that there is some pockets of parking in this area so far as I'm aware, particularly the 6 to 8 car parks at Foundry Park, which I'm not actually sure if that is council land or state government land attached to these houses, etc. So there is a reasonable amount of parking in this area, It's just the utility of the parking in the area. There's some very vulnerable residents that live in some of the properties along this street, and I don't think that's any huge secret, but also along Cecil Street and Bank Street. And it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our parking policy is regularly reviewed and that we listen to the petitioners that have come here this evening, because there's a multitude of competing needs in this area. But ultimately, it's a pretty fluid area that I think we can come up to an amicable solution with. And I think Councillor Sirikov's alternate motion comes a very long way in allowing us to do that. So thank you for putting it this evening, and thank you particularly to those residents that went to such hard work to get this petition heard here at Council this evening.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? If not, I will now put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? That motion is carried. Okay, great. We're moving on to 7.2, which is the petition regarding noise and issues at Flower Child in Shakespeare Grove, St Kilda. Councillors, are there any questions of the officers? Councillor Bond.
What sort of licence does Flower Child have? Given the numerous reports of loud music until at least 2 in the morning, what licence are they operating under, and is the behaviour and observations as described tonight consistent with that planning permit that they're required to operate under?
So I believe Mark J is going to respond to that. Am I correct?
Yes, hello there. Through you, Mayor, I can confirm that Flower Child has a cafe restaurant liquor licence that allows trading from 9 a.m. until 1 a.m. on a Monday, between Sunday and Wednesday. Between Thursday and Saturday, they are open until 3 a.m. With that, the second part to that question was about is the behaviour acceptable? Is that correct?
Is it consistent with the permit that they're operating under, I guess?
Okay. Through you, Mayor, I would say at this point it's an open investigation. Officers are currently investigating the concerns that have been raised and will be able to report back to the petitioner.
I might ask a question, if I may, Mr. Mark. Just with that permit, is that something that we gave out initially, or was it like a permit of already use? Just to understand, like, sort of whether there's been any soundproofing or things like that. Is that something that we would have had to consider in giving the permit if we in fact did?
Through you, Mayor, in relation to the Flower Child venue itself and not the parklet, to provide an accurate answer, I would need to take that on notice.
Councillor Clark.
Through you, Mayor, can you advise if the parklet, is there any opportunity to move the parklet? And secondly, does the generator need to be in that direct area? Is there an opportunity to move that away?
Through you, Mayor, the location of the parklet was as proposed initially, and did gain the support of the traffic engineers who were part of the decision-making process for the parklet. And certainly with regards to the generator noise, we are seeking to deal with that and deal with the noise, and whether it can be baffled or relocated are certainly factors that we'll be looking into.
Councillor Sirikov.
With reference to the parklet, are they just meant to be tables and chairs for dining, or does it also allow refrigerators?
Through you, Mayor, the parklet is for consumption of drinks, and it does allow for the fridges as well.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Bond.
My question, I guess, is similar to the one you asked earlier, Madam Mayor. Is the 3 a.m. licence, I'm not aware we've ever handed one out in my time on council, and given prior to that it was a real estate agents for many years, is the 3 a.m. licence a carryover from licences issued many, many years ago when there were numerous 3 a.m. and 24-hour liquor licences issued to lots of businesses along Fitzroy Street, and most of those licences are still in existence? Is it one of those ones?
Through you, Mayor, to provide an accurate answer, I would need to take that one on notice.
Any other questions, councillors? If not, I have an officer's recommendation. Would someone like to move that or something different? Councillor Copsey to move. I'll second that. Councillor Crawford to second. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak to the motion?
I will, and just to thank those residents and businesses who have provided this feedback through the form of the motion. Obviously, our social and economic support package in response to COVID-19 is in progress and being rolled out. We made a conscious decision as a council not to get wrapped up in red tape in order to get those assistance measures out there and working for community, and part of that approach means that it's iterative, and so of course not everything works entirely as it is planned. I want to thank the community members who've been proactive in raising these issues, and also the council officers for their work so far. I'm keen to see where we go with the officer recommendation, and I think one of the presenters this evening summed it up very nicely. I'm not sure if he's still here, that we want to come to amicable solutions for everybody on these. So thank you very much for the active feedback in the moment, and let's hope that we can find a solution here that allows good support for local business, everyone who's participating in the Parklet program and otherwise. Thank you.
I'm not going to speak to the motion. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? If not, I will put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. We are moving on to 7.3, which is a petition requesting sunshades for Port Melbourne playgrounds. Are there any questions, councillors, about this report? I have one, if I may, if there's no other councillors. I understand that this is specifically in regards to sunshades in Port Melbourne at this particular spot, but do we have a policy on sunshades generally? Because I know a lot of our parks perhaps are in a similar position. Is that Anthony Trail? You should just sit up here, sir, for the rest of the night, I think. No.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we do have a policy in our place-based strategy about preference for natural trees. All that information will come in our response at the next council meeting.
Could I ask a follow-up question, if I may? Given that there are many parks in this situation, would it be something that we perhaps might need to develop criteria on in terms of need and scale, so it's not quite as simple as just funding a sunshade? Is it something that we might have to look a little bit deeper into?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is possible, and through our response next week we'll give indications on pricing, maintenance and some of those other factors that need to be considered through this request.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I come from a background where I've been organising shade sales in school situations for many years. Do we have guidelines about safe use of these shade sales? Because I have concerns where they're in an area that's not under direct supervision, we may end up having some serious injuries to people using them in inappropriate ways.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we only have a couple of locations, and there's a lot of design that goes into those, especially with the structures that we have on the foreshore with high winds. So yes, there is a lot of risk management that needs to be considered with these types of structures.
Councillor Sirikoff.
In terms of wanting to provide more shade in the area, is there an opportunity to maybe plant up appropriate trees?
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, there is an opportunity, and that will be part of our response next meeting.
Are there any other questions? If not, we have an officer's recommendation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Copsey, do I have someone to second the motion? Don't be shy. Councillor Martin. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to the motion? Would anyone else like to speak to this particular motion? If not, I shall put that on. Councillor Consolo.
Is that on? Okay. I'd like to thank. Is that on? Yeah. Okay. I'd like to thank the petitioner and all the signatories. This is a park that I frequent as well, and it's very exciting that it was redeveloped. But even at the beginning, we noticed that the trees that were planted were not sufficient enough. They are growing, but of course it's still going to take a lot of time for them to provide shade. But even their location is not necessarily where it's going to provide shade on the metal slides, etc. So I'm hoping that that can be taken into consideration when we get that report back. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. Now it's petition 7.4, which is regarding dangerous hoon driving and vehicle noise in the city of Port Phillip. Are there any questions of the officers in relation to this report? Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Would officers please inform councillors if there's any opportunity for the City of Port Phillip in conjunction with the Port Phillip Police Service to gain grants for the purchase of mobile CCTV cameras at all?
Anthony, Mr. Trail? Or
I can...
sorry, Tony Keenan.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Yeah, there is an opportunity for a joint application with Council and Victoria Police through the Community Safety Infrastructure Grant Program.
Councillor Baxter.
So with regards to use of mobile CCTV and any acquisition or even loan of these, how does that fit with our policy around use of CCTV? Is mobile CCTV mentioned? I can't quite remember. And under what circumstances are we to be looking at these?
Is that you, Tony, again?
Through you, Mayor, I would have to check that. I assume it would be jointly owned by Council and the police, so we would have to look at how that would impact on our own CCTV policy.
Are there further questions?
Sorry, Mayor, through you, if it was purchased by Council alone, I imagine that then Council's CCTV policy would apply.
Councillor Pearl.
This may have to be taken on notice, but my question to officers is: could you confirm if my understanding is correct that the Stonington RoboCop cease mobile CCTV is owned by the Stonington Council, stored at the Stonington Council premises, but utilised under licence by Victoria Police. Are you able to confirm that or provide any, shed any more light on how the Stonington Council does it?
Anthony Trail?
Anthony Trail.
Yes, come on down.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that is correct. The equipment is owned by Stonington and stored at the Melbourne Police Station.
Are there any other questions? So we have an officer's recommendation. Do Would someone like to move this or something different? Councillor Pearl.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with I'm moving an alternate motion, but it's the officer's recommendation with the addition of 2 points, please.
If you
just while we put that up, I've just provided these to the officers, so I'll just wait for them to put up on the screen because there was one small word change before I read it out. I'll just go ahead and read it, but I'll read it in a moment. So it's unchanged item 1 to 6. Then 7, request officers to provide council with a report to consider the requirements and costings of the purchase and implementation of mobile CCTV trailers in conjunction with the Port Phillip Police Service area by July 2021. And then 8, request officers submit a joint application with the Port Phillip Police Service area to the Community Safety Infrastructure Grant Program for the purchase of a mobile CCTV camera.
We've just got a clarifying question.
Through you, Mayor, just Councillor Pearl, you've used the plural trailers in item 7 and then 8 is singular. I'm just wondering if you could clarify.
Yeah, 8 was given under advice from officers, so I think that grant program is roughly around the affordability of a single trailer. So, but it might be deemed that the officer's report under number 7 may say we don't need any trailers, or we might need 5 trailers.
So are you ready to read those amendments out or adjustments?
I think I've already read them. Do I need to read them again?
Would it be possible, just because I was hoping to ask a clarifying question, to see the second point, point 8?
Point 8's already up there. Perhaps if I ask officers to shift to the next page. There we go.
So it might not be a clarifying question of Councillor Pearl, it might be of officers. Does the Community Safety Program require a joint application? If we put that in there, does it preclude us from putting in our own? Or is it required that for this grant to be given, that it has to be with the police? Is that why that particular point is in there?
I'm happy to answer it, but perhaps it might be better for officers. There's 3 points on this. The first point is that this piece of infrastructure is essentially being provided to the police, and the Stonington example is that it's branded as a police piece of infrastructure, not a council piece of infrastructure. So it's important that we're purchasing a tool that will be best used by the police force, not really council. The second component is that the policies and procedures that will be put in place need to be in partnership with the police, and the third part is, as Councillor Martin's just referred to me, is being in conjunction with the police is highly likely to increase our likelihood of being successful for the grant. Officers may wish to add because they actually put it in there for me.
So I guess, is there anything else to Councillor Pearl's point? Does it preclude us, if we were needed to, for whatever reason, to apply for our own, notwithstanding those valid reasons? I just don't want to have to come back again if...
Through you, Madam Mayor, the grant encourages partnerships, especially with Victoria Police on CCTV requests, and the local inspector has advised me that she would be supportive of that, and the fact that there would be an arrangement, if successful, with an application that they would host it. We would want to have confidence through our application process that they're joint with the requirements that we would have with that piece of infrastructure.
Great, thank you. So Councillor Pearl has moved this. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Martin. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, here this evening you have the opportunity to start the process to solve what is not a new problem, but certainly an acute problem over the past 3 or 4 months. This motion is well considered by officers from 1 to 6 that was originally tabled, and I am the first councillor in my short history on this council to advocate against councillors making policy on the run. And apologies for not circulating this beforehand, but this is not something I'd crafted before this evening, and to be frank, the report that came to councillors was quite late, and I had only had time to fully consider it today. And in questioning and hearing members of the public here this evening about the effectiveness of what's commonly known as RoboCop in terms of the deterrent of the mobile CCTV camera, and in short discussions with officers whilst the meeting's been going, I thought this was an apt opportunity for us all to start the ball rolling to determine if there's a pathway for this council to potentially follow the lead of the City of Stonington and help our local police force where perhaps the state government haven't been able to provide resources, and that is through the potential procurement of a mobile CCTV camera. Now, for those of you that aren't aware of what this looks like, we're not talking about a surveillance device that's hidden away. This is a fairly, I'll describe as a sizable trailer with a small generator on it, and a ominous-looking camera which can be extended to 3 or 4 metres height if required. This has the ability to beam live to a police piece of infrastructure or also record. That's one part of the device in terms of the surveillance advantage that it has, but really it's almost awe-inspiring to see the look on the Hoons' faces as they come around the corner and see RoboCop standing there taking a picture of them. It's an instant attitude adjuster. And I think it, from our small discussions with our local police about this piece of infrastructure, this tool, it will be very valuable to them and goes a long way to helping us safeguard our community. Now, why am I putting this additional motion in here for Section 7 and Section 8? Let's run through them. Section 8 is effectively a recommendation of the officers that are given him on the side. The Safety Infrastructure Grant Program closes in March, so it's important that we give officers clear direction that will allow them to move quickly to put an application in. Now, concurrently, Section 7 details that a report will come back to Council by July. That report has 2 components to it. One is the costings of how much these tools and pieces of infrastructure cost. That can be included in the budget process as required. But the second part of it, which is probably more important from a council point of view, is to consider and provide recommendations around how council would effectively implement this tool through policy guidelines, community consultation, what would need to be done to do this properly. So there's 2 concurrent processes in place. Happy to get criticism for being a bit policy on the run, that is true, but that's why we have this process of amending motions as required. I have taken some advice from officers, and I thank them very much for the short consideration they've been able to give us. That's the details of item 7 and item 8. I might address the motion more holistically in my closing comments, but councillors, this is a rare opportunity, particularly early in our term, to provide a piece of really valuable infrastructure potentially to the Victoria Police if they see value in it, if officers are able to provide a recommendation where this council would be able to consider the implementation of it. I wholeheartedly hope you're able to support my alt motion here this evening.
Councillor Martin.
My 2 Gateway Ward colleagues and myself have been meeting regularly with the group who presented the petition earlier this evening, and we have been very concerned about some of the things that we've been seeing in parts of Gateway Ward. And when we spoke with Inspector Chugg as a council some weeks ago, she mentioned that there was the possibility of getting some additional CCTV, and we lived in hope. And within an hour of what I call the Dalek arriving at Station Pier, I think I would have had 15 messages in my inbox, and the changes in behaviour that were noted by the residents of Beacon Cove over the 4 days that our friend the Dalek was there have convinced me that the CCTV, portable CCTV device like the one that we saw at Station Pier have the potential to hugely influence the way that some of our, not so much our local residents, but perhaps visitors to our neighbourhood in particular are behaving, and that influence would be for the better. I do take on board the comments that I think might have been Councillor Baxter made earlier. I would be very concerned if we didn't look at all the privacy issues that are involved in this, and that we only deployed our portable cameras in situations where we believed that public order was perhaps of more importance than privacy, that we wouldn't want to see these sitting on every street corner. That's the last thing I want. But given what I've seen happen down in the Station Pier area in the 4 days that the temporary camera was there, I believe that this has the potential to make a huge impact, and I commend the motion to you.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Councillor Sirikoff.
I would like to endorse both what Councillor Pearl and Councillor Martin have said. I think this would be a great opportunity for along the whole shoreline, foreshore, from Port Melbourne through to St Kilda and even Elwood. So there's a deterrent for next year. It'd be great to implement this now in preparation for next summer.
Would anyone else like to speak? Councillor Baxter.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I won't be supporting this. What is it? An alternative motion. Although I don't really have any issue with number 7 in terms of bringing a report back. It's number 8. Submitting a joint application for the purchase of a mobile CCTV camera. I've asked the question about how this works with our current CCTV policy, and the officers have replied that they're not sure. So how we can direct them to purchase something when we're not even sure it's actually in line with our policy seems to me to be premature. I also know that with regards to the mobile CCTV device that is owned by Stonington, they have to pay to maintain it and take care of it. That is a very unusual situation. I'm fairly certain there is no other local government area that actually owns one of these on behalf of the police, and the only way they ended up with that situation was because there was a promise by the federal member, and then it sort of ended up falling on the council. Because that's unusual and it's poor practice, I don't think we should replicate it. I don't think we should be doing this. I think it would set a bad precedent. We don't purchase and maintain police vehicles on behalf of the police, or uniforms or weapons or anything like that. The police should be in charge of their resourcing of the tools that they need to do the job. To me, this is a cost shift, and that's one major issue there. So if the police need extra equipment to manage crime, they should be in charge of resourcing that. And if they feel that they need certain things, then we can support them in doing that. But I don't think we should pay for it, even though we're not necessarily paying for the purchase, but certainly for the maintenance and upkeep. I will say that there is a worry about further surveillance, particularly with mobile surveillance. I understand that Councillor Martin has said, you don't necessarily want to see this on every street corner. The thing about mobile CCTV is it can be on any street corner at any time. It can put it anywhere and look at you at any time for any reason. And what we've heard quite often from the police is that the surveillance, whether it's this or other cameras, are used for what they call tasking. They basically continually monitor a certain area, and then that helps them decide how they might allocate resources as to where they might put police and so forth. And that sounds quite useful for their resourcing, I suppose. But what that means is that they're watching us always. They're always watching us for signs of potential criminal activity, not to respond to actual crime. So I don't want to increase that. And I'm pretty sure that our CCTV policy, which we had big discussions over many months in forming, should be driving our decision-making in this area, rather than just sort of half-heartedly referred to in an aside during a debate in which something is tacked on to the end of a petition response at the last minute. And I understand, Councillor Pearl, you said you would rather do this the other way, and I believe you. I think you normally do, but I think this is undercooked, and I don't like it.
Councillor Bond.
Just like to commend Councillor Pearl for listening to his community and responding accordingly. I think we've all been inundated with emails and correspondence over the last few months concerning the Hoon behaviour that mostly has taken place up in Port Melbourne, but has also at times been seen down in St Kilda. A lot of the time as a council, our response to the concerns raised with us is, look, there's nothing we can do about it, it's a police matter. And by and large it is a police matter. And most of the addressing of Hoon behaviour will be a police response, not a council response. But every now and again something comes along and there's an opportunity for council to be able to play a part in addressing behaviour such as the Hoon behaviour that we've witnessed up in Port Melbourne. We've heard from the residents that the moment that camera went in, the problem wasn't fully fixed, but it was partially addressed. That camera made a big difference. So we have the evidence. We know that within our limited role, this is one area that we as a council can play. And we also heard earlier tonight from our residents who came along and told us they want us to play a role, they want us to address this. They don't want us to sit here and just put our hands up and say, well, sorry, not our responsibility, go and see the police, we can't help them. You know, you'll need to go down to Chapel Street or ring South Melbourne. Here is a practical example of something that the City of Port Phillip can do to assist our police in this local area. And I think it's important that we do whatever we can at times to assist our police. Often there is not much we can do. Often it is off a police matter. But when items like this come along, where we can play a role, where we can assist the police through, within our limited scope of addressing Hoon behaviour, within our limited scope of addressing amenity issues, we should grasp those opportunities, and this is one. So this item doesn't commit us to any expenditure, it just commits us to have a look at it. It says let's go and find out how much it costs and let's go and find out are those grants available, and if so, let's apply for one. So there's no budget implications for this. So we will get a chance to make considered decisions on this. They will come back to us for a decision at some point in time in the future. But all we're doing here is responding to requests from our community for us to do a bit more in addressing Hoon behaviour in primarily Port Melbourne, but in other areas of Port Phillip, and that's what this motion here tonight does. So I commend your motion, Councillor Pearl, and well done for putting it forward. I know it is last minute, but there's times when we have to act swiftly. There's times when we don't get to delay and procrastinate. You've taken the initiative tonight to put this forward and tack this onto the officer's recommendation. I commend you for doing that, and I hope my fellow councillors support this very important motion.
Councillor Copsey.
Can I ask a clarifying question of the officers around point 8?
Yes.
And whether it's envisaged that such a joint application would require a budgetary commitment from City of Port Phillip?
I can take that on notice, but my understanding, no, it's an application for funding. But I will check the guidelines, or unless Mr. Trail has anything to add to that.
Mr. Trail.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the conditions of the grant don't require any council funding towards it. All it is required is the project management to purchase the grant and implement the grant.
While you're there, may I ask a clarifying question? But if we were to purchase it, that ongoing maintenance would fall to us or the police? Or is that something we would have to negotiate?
Through you, Madam Mayor, my understanding is it'll be the maintenance sits with the council, consistent with the CCTV we currently have in our municipality.
I'd like to speak, if I may. Look, I will be supporting this, not that it's a perfect motion, but in fact it has been in train the day of the big Hoon incident in Elwood and St Kilda. Mr Trail was already on the case talking about this community safety grant ahead. The officers were ahead of us, and it was, it was good to see that that was an option that they were considering amongst many others. Look, it may have budget implications for us, and it will, having given that clarifying question, it will have ongoing budget, the maintenance of it and the storage of it. So there is something to be considered there. I will be supportive of it because of what happened. I think the level that the hooning took was no longer just a little bit of a noise issue, but the aggression and the danger that happened in the Elwood St Kilda area a couple of weeks ago took it to another level where we can't ignore that kind of antisocial behaviour. I think it's a good reminder that complex social issues require all levels of government to work together. It's not one person's remit, to one level of government's remit to solve anything, and that often requires the combined efforts of all levels of governments and all levels of financing from various levels in order to try to address these complex issues. I think it's a good opportunity to a good example of where that can be possible. So I will be in support of this. Councillor Copsey.
Thanks. I won't support the alternate motion, and I flag that should the motion fail, I'll put the officer recommendation. Principally, my concerns are similar to those that Councillor Baxter has outlined. I appreciate there's been discussion about Port Phillip potentially applying for this grant, and that the motion speaks about investigating options such as road safety cameras, which I'm really content for us to continue to do. Where we are at today, though, I think really valid questions have been raised during the course of this debate about the consistency of this with our CCTV policy, which I have not had any time to consider. I'm sorry, Councillor Pearl, since this was sent through during the course of this meeting. I would like to have those. Thanks. I think mine might have gone flat. I'd like to have those conversations with councillors and officers to get a bit more clarity around how this operates. There are implications for the extension of surveillance, and we know that it may be that traffic infringements, which is really what the police are seeking to respond to here, may be one of the areas in which CCTV is more effective. We certainly know there are contexts where it is not particularly effective at all in crime prevention and detection, but this may be an appropriate place. I just would like to discuss that more with officers and councillors with more time than we've had in the meeting tonight. And I'm pretty concerned, given the answer that we just received about the unknown tail of this camera, the financial impost that it's going to be, just not comfortable, given we've got a very difficult budget coming up. I think that we can consider that, but I think we should be considering it in the context of other priorities that our community has raised. All that being said, I think that points 7 and 8 actually don't need to be in the motion in order for us to continue to investigate them with officers. I understand Mr Trail's been working on this and that it was the intent of the officers to explore this. I would say regardless of the alt motion being put tonight. So my preference would be that we put the officer recommendation, get the answers to those questions that I think are valid, that have been raised during this debate, and then, yeah, go from there. So I'll put the officer recommendation should this motion fail.
Are there any other people that would wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Pearl, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, councillors that have spoken. Thank you also to Councillors Martin and Consolo for your service in relation to this issue. This has been the issue that's bound us on our most recent council term. We haven't been on council very long together, and this is pretty much the key issue that's been brought up by our constituents, and it's been a pleasure to work with you, and particularly you did most of the heavy lifting whilst I was on the holiday in January, particularly with the residents, and I'm grateful. That should be acknowledged. A couple of points to Councillor Baxter and Councillor Copsey. Councillor Baxter, we're obviously not, this is not a motion to purchase the equipment. We're applying for a grant. So if we're successful in the grant, the acceptance of that grant is still our prerogative. So we still have an opportunity, should this council or officers recommend us not to move forward with a procurement process. Our report will provide full details on maintenance, and thank you for providing that, because that's not something I was actually aware of in terms of the Stonington infrastructure, and that's something that we have to consider, obviously. This motion gives us the time for officers to go away and consider whatever maintenance obligations. I can't think they would be all that large, but we'll see what how much it costs to maintain a small generator, a camera and a couple of tyres. Cost shift, you're 100% right, Councillor Baxter, this is a cost shift and we would prefer not to do it in some respects, but if we can get the state government to come forward with this pretty generous grant program, that's a fairly large capital investment that the council doesn't have to make up front, which is a huge community benefit. It's also more likely for that piece of the need for that piece of infrastructure to be convinced through the grant panel if we are involved. There may be some tail cost, as both yourself and Councillor Copsey has brought up, but this process gives us the time to consider that and it will come back. Let's face it, the police already have the ability to put up CCTV wherever they want, which is why they're able to get the Stonington Council equipment and put it in Waterfront Place. And when the RoboCop was moved, they already installed a temporary CCTV camera on one of the buildings adjacent to it. So they already have the ability to do this if and when they want to, and I understand they actually do it for St Kilda Festival also, if my memory is correct in saying. And more than fair feedback on the half-baked resolution in the meeting. Happy to cop that because I've given it to you on a number of occasions, I think. Councillor Copsey, very valid questions on policies. This process provides us the time, exactly what you're talking about, and the space to answer these questions that you have. And it also ensures that this process, in terms of the application of the grant under item 8, is done in a fully transparent fashion. So our community know what we're doing now. These aren't decisions that are made behind the scenes by councillors or by officers. This direction on the 7 and 8 gives clear directions to officers to ensure that it's done in a transparent way, that the community know what we're doing. And the final decision now will 100% come back to this council to ensure that it is in your hands and we can make that decision together. Thank you everybody for your contribution this evening, and I'll leave it at that, and hopefully it gets up. Perhaps if I could, Madam Mayor, request that the vote is done under division.
Sure. Okay, I will put that vote, that motion to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Consolo, Councillor Bond, Councillor Sirikoff, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Martin, Councillor Pearl, Councillor Clark. All those against? Councillor Copsey, Councillor Baxter. That motion is carried. Now, I was going to try and get through the petitions before we took a break, but we've taken longer than one hoped, so we might take a quick 5-minute break now, everyone, and we'll return whatever that time in. What is it now? At 8:32. See you then. Okay, folks, we will resume with petition 7.5, petition requesting to reduce a significant risk of a child being hit on Liade Street, Port Melbourne by vehicles. Are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Consolo.
Through you, Mayor. I'd like to ask what is included in a pedestrian survey, as unlike with cars where they have the tubes in the roads, it seems more challenging to collect a wide cross-section of...
Point of order, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I was just wondering whether Councillor Martin needed to declare the conflict and leave before we did any of this.
And he just spoke to... That's me. Sorry to interrupt, okay. Councillor Consolo. Yes, Councillor Martin.
So, Madam Mayor, I've sought advice from governance, and I'd like governance to let council know whether they believe I've got a conflict of interest in this matter or not.
So it's fine. Thank you, though, for bringing me up, Councillor Baxter. Councillor Consolo, please continue.
That's all right. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm not... Bear with me. I'm getting back from break in my head. Kirsty, did you want to speak to why Councillor Martin is fine to participate in this?
Certainly, happy to provide advice through you, Mayor. Section 129 of the Local Government Act provides an exemption from conflicts where the interest in a matter only arises because the person is the representative of the council on a not-for-profit organisation and receives no personal advantage from the organisation. At the council meeting of 2 December last year, Councillor Martin was appointed the representative on the Bubba Womanjeka Family and Children's Centre Board and has not declared any personal advantage from this organisation. Therefore, Councillor Martin's role with the board does not give rise to a conflict in this matter.
Thank you very much. Third time lucky, Councillor Consolo.
No worries. All right, through you, Mayor. What is included in a pedestrian survey, as unlike with cars, where you have the tubes in the roads, it seems more challenging to collect a wide cross-section of data?
Who am I going to on this one? Councillor Lilly, was it?
Through you, Mayor, what's involved is counting the pedestrians crossing at the location, and we could either undertake these internally or get a consultant to undertake this activity.
Did you have further questions, Councillor Consolo?
Yes, through you, Mayor. With that, when are we nominating the time? Because it varies at, drop-off is really significant, that few hours in the morning and a little bit late in the afternoon. If it's school holidays, you're not going to see the kids if they're in sessional care. So some information around that, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, we would undertake surveys in considering use of the school, so that we would be able to capture the use by families attending that school, given that there are safety issues for that cohort.
Councillor Pearl.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I must say I'm a bit perplexed and confused because Council spent tens of thousands of dollars installing an elevated pedestrian crossing 38 metres away from the entrance of Bubba Womanjeka less than 2 years ago. Why was this not considered in the design of that application? I would also note that the former Mayor was very supportive of that crossing being put in place and the location of that crossing.
Is that Brian T or is that you, Lee?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I will refer that one actually to Brian T. The other location was considered of greater safety risk, which is the reason the Wombat Crossing was installed, but I'll refer to Mr Brian T to add any further detail.
Two reasons why it was installed at Esplanade West. When at the time there was an assessment of the usage there and at the Kilda, and there was greater use at Esplanade West, and indeed there had been a greater pedestrian use, and indeed there had been an accident there.
Councillor Pearl, follow-up question.
Would officers be able to provide any details of potential alternatives than just another tens of thousands of dollars on a Wombat Crossing, such as perhaps fencing down the medium strip that would stop pedestrians from running across, and enhanced fencing arrangements that would stop children from running out of both the childcare centre and also the park?
Brian T or?
Yes, look, as part of our response to this, investigating this, we'd be happy to have a look at other alternatives and take that on notice and come back to you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Bond.
If we were to go through with this and remove one Wombat Crossing and relocate it 38 metres down the road, what would that do to the pedestrian safety at the location where we're removing the Wombat Crossing from? Are we going to have two Wombat Crossings within 40 metres of each other?
Brian T.
Through you, Mayor, I think the proposal is to have an additional Wombat Crossing, but we'll have a look at the viability of it. The reality is, I think, as has been indicated and as council officers have found, the volume of traffic, both car traffic but pedestrian traffic, has increased, and the sight lines, due to the growth in vegetation, has decreased. We'll have a look at it, but it might be that we do need two crossings in that area, and that's the proposal, is that we conduct those pedestrian surveys to see if that is indeed warranted.
Councillor Pearl.
Has the pedestrian sightlines decreased because of council's planting of about 30 or 40 trees in the area in the past 2 years?
Brian?
I'm actually not aware of the specific nature of that vegetation. I'm happy to, through you, Mayor, take that on notice.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Sirikoff.
I'm just wondering as to what would be an approximate cost to another consultation and the cost of another Wombat Crossing. Would it be inappropriate? Could we just do a Wombat Crossing if the two are the same amount of money? I don't know. I don't know what the costing are for those two items.
Brian T.
So we would need to, the process would be a pedestrian survey. We'd need to do that to satisfy ourselves that there is a need for the Wombat Crossing, but we'd also need that to satisfy the Department of Transport, whose permission we need to put a Wombat Crossing on that road. In terms of the cost of that, that is something that we can do with our existing budget. In terms of the cost of the Wombat Crossing, that would be, we need to work through the detail of that, but it would be around 150,000. If the survey warrants the Wombat Crossing and if the Department of Transport supports a Wombat Crossing, then we'd need to come back to councillors and seek council approval for funding for that Wombat Crossing.
Are there any other questions, or I have one, or Councillor Bond?
So the petition states that the petition states that the original Wombat Crossing was planned for this location, but it got installed at Esplanade West instead. What was the original reason it got moved? What was the original reason it got moved to Esplanade West from the proposed location where they now wish to have a Wombat Crossing installed? And was Robert Wominjeka consulted in that decision to change the current the proposed location to where it is at present?
Brian.
The decision at the time to move it to Esplanade West was based on the fact that there'd been a crash at Esplanade West and not at and there has not been any at the proposed location, as well as the pedestrian surveys that were done at the time, which showed that indeed there was a greater demand and need at Esplanade West.
I might ask a question if I may, Brian. Is there opportunity for council to apply to state funding for Wombat Crossings and safety road improvements?
It's something that we will definitely investigate. I'm not aware of any of the at the moment, but we will investigate that. You may just the Wominjeka, just to go back to the previous question from Councillor Bond, I omitted to say that the Wominjeka had been notified about the location of the Wombat Crossing at Esplanade West at the time.
So, councillors, do we have any more questions, or can we move to either taking on the officer's recommendation or something different? Do I have a mover? Councillor Copsey. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Baxter. Councillor Copsey.
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Baxter. Would anyone else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Pearl.
Thanks very much, Madam Mayor. I'm a bit perplexed and angry about this one because I thought it was a bit asinine that we put the pedestrian crossing where we did 2.5 years ago, and it was a substantial investment, and that investment was wholeheartedly supported by a number of people. And as you would know, up until recently, for the past 4 years, I've been at that place pretty much twice a day, every day, and hopefully from about June this year, I'll be back there every day for the next 4 years. So I know this area probably better than most, and I very rarely see that pedestrian crossing used as it was intended to, but we made a substantial investment, almost $200,000 I think was the total cost of it when it was put in. The Mayor at the time supported it. The council officers obviously strongly supported it, and my understanding was Bubba Wamajika also supported it. And we can't just keep coming back to the trough and re-prosecuting issues when we've already put substantial investment as a council into this area. For the total amount of money we spent here, if you're going to put another one in, that's like, let's call it $350,000. You could afford to hire a peak pedestrian officer for 6 years. That would solve all issues to safely usher people across the road. It perplexes me that this council makes a decision, gets the support, and then has to come back and re-prosecute it, and potentially, if that was a mistake, which frankly I think it was a few years ago, because the location of that pedestrian crossing doesn't seem logical to me, albeit there was a very serious accident on that corner. I'm just incredibly frustrated. I think we need to do the work, and we'll work through it again, but it wasn't even mentioned in the submissions, etc., that we've spent tens of thousands of dollars trying to solve a problem. There's got to be a better way to encourage people to walk 40 metres to the left to cross abundantly safely. What Council's also done is, since we put that crossing in, I think in end of 2018, call it, we've taken the toxic soil out of the medium strip. We've installed probably 10 pathways between Esplanade West and Lagoon Reserve to encourage pedestrian traffic across the road where people shouldn't be crossing, even though we built a dedicated pedestrian crossing up the road. And then we've planted that medium strip with eucalyptus trees, which have decreased the vision. So, I guess this is a good lesson for this council in terms of when we're prosecuting these decisions and assessing these sort of decisions, that we really need to make sure that we're putting a microscopic view on what the future looks like in these sorts of areas and how policies can compound on top of each other. So happy to support this here this evening, but in terms of forking out another $200,000 potentially to solve a problem that we should have solved 2 years ago, it's going to be very, very challenging. I won't say anything about it. It'd be sugarcoating if I sat here and said, fully support the petition and everything about it. There's a risk report now that says that there's a risk. We can't ignore that. We have to consider it. But my own personal experience, having been there hundreds and hundreds of times, at peak times, dropping my child off and hopefully my next child off there, I can say that it is a very safe course across from the child centre. And also 2 fairly safe options for Lagoon Reserve if there's responsible parents around. If there's not responsible parents around and we have the 8-year-old Marcus Pearl out there, God forbid, yes, there's some safety considerations, but even if we had Wombat Crossing there, I'm not sure it would fix the problem of an 8-year-old Marcus Pearl running across the road. It probably won't solve the issue either, but we have to do something about this. But you can probably sense my frustration that in my view, we didn't deal with this properly 2 years ago. Rather confusing speech, but I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Consolo.
Sorry, Brendan, thank you. I understand your frustration, and my frustration is similar, that it should have been put, in my opinion, on the other end, because when it comes to what side people park on to drop their kids off, it's the school side. So when you're slowing down traffic, and that's what I think people are trying to achieve from this, is to slow traffic down and mark it as a zone, that there are children there, is that it should be in the other direction so that it stops where those children are more predominantly on that side of the street. Where it is now, that doesn't slow them down. With the frustration about money already spent, when I think it should have been in the other location. And when it comes to responsible parenting, sometimes there's things out of control when you have young kids. You're holding a baby and you have a toddler, and you're not. I wouldn't blame the parents always. I think we have an opportunity to use design here to help improve the condition and lower the risk.
Anyone else like to speak to the motion? I will briefly say, welcome to Elwood, where there are Wombat crossings within 40 metres of each other everywhere. But it's don't worry that it's too close a distance. I will be supporting this this motion. It does seem unfortunate that we are back here, but we do need to look at the safety of the children in our municipality. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. We are now moving on to the presentation of reports, which is from 8 to 14. So we are starting with the report, which is 12.1, Amendment C186 Port, which is the Montague Commercial Precinct Permanent Heritage Controls. This is the panel recommendations and adoptions. Do we have any questions, councillors, of the officers? If not, do we have a mover? Councillor Pearl, do we have a seconder? Councillor Copsey. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak?
It's one of the best areas of our city. In fact, I like it so much I tried to turn the name of the suburb at one point, and thank you for the majority of councillors for supporting that, well, those of you that were there. This goes some way to protecting this area, the DNA of this area for future generations, and it's seriously important. This is a very exciting area in terms of the Fisherman's Bend precinct, albeit I would love a train station to be finishing off there at the moment, but that's never going to happen. But there are some key catalytic pieces of infrastructure that are already in this precinct, which is it's fantastic. And there's some good quality development going on in there at the moment. So hopefully 10 years from now, this will be an area that we'll be proud of. And in many respects, this piece of policy has come probably a little bit too late, but let's be thankful that we're already here. So it's been a very, very long process, thanking officers that we get to this point, and still got a little way to go. So I wholeheartedly support it, and I hope you do also, councillors, and I'm sure you read in detail the very lengthy report that was attached here this evening and understood every word.
Councillor Copsey.
Just repeat the thanks to the officers and all who've engaged with these processes. They are long and complex and take a lot of energy and work, but are very, very important to shaping our city. So thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? If not, let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Now we're moving on to 12.2, which is the Port Melbourne Special Rate and Charge Combined Scheme Declaration Report. This is a decision to declare. Do you have any questions of the officers, councillors? If not, do we have a mover? Councillor Martin, do we have a seconder? I'll second it. Councillor Martin, would you like to speak to this?
I've been fortunate enough to have been working in the Port Melbourne area for many years, and in the last 3 months on council I've got to know the local business association even better than I did previously, and there are some very, very passionate people who are behind that business association, not just to support the Bay Street traders per se, but they also look after their own as well, so that as we've gone through COVID, many of the traders who are perhaps coping better have been supporting some of those people who, for whatever reason, whether it's language difficulties, whether it's they're relatively new to the area, helping support them. So we've got a really tight group of people working together to try and support each other and to improve the amenity in Bay Street. And this local rate, with the support that it gets from council, will help to improve that as we come out of COVID and as Bay Street will continue to develop over the next few years. And I know that my two ward council colleagues and I have been to a number of meetings with the Traders Association. We've been meeting traders on a regular basis, and we're looking forward. Certainly, I don't want to speak too much, but certainly for myself, and I hope I'm speaking for my Team Gateway colleagues, we look forward to working with both the association and the traders in general to advance business in Bay Street.
I just wanted to say that I know that some of the traders associations across the municipality do great work, and the Port Melbourne one is one of those, and it's sort of a way forward looking for some of the other streets that are looking to create business associations possibly, the great things that can come for it. But I did wanted to point out this money that council is merely the collector and holder. This is money that is provided completely back to the Traders Association or Business Association for them to choose how to spend. So it's not council collecting on behalf for us, it's just holding the money for that organisation to use as they see fit. Are there any other councillors who would like to speak to this motion, or shall we put it to the vote? Let's put it to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Moving on to 13.1, this is the Library Action Plan. This is the draft going out for public consultation. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers? Councillor Bond.
Can we just get a quick rundown or definition of what is a 24/7 library and what we can expect to see in a 24/7 library in follow-up to a question that was asked earlier tonight?
Tony Keenan.
Through you, Mayor. Some council libraries have already implemented these. They're essentially self-serve 24-hour libraries where you go in, swipe using a library card. You can access it any time. There's security cameras which monitor, so it would enable people to do that.
Any other further questions? I would like to ask a question. Mr. Keenan, the process to get to this draft consultation, I mean, because of COVID, it seemed like it's gone forever, but could you refresh my memory, there was a long period of consultation in the time leading up to getting to this draft, was there not? Was that over, could you refresh my memory on how long that process kind of took?
Yes, and through you, Mayor. There was an extensive period of consultation. There was a consultant engaged who met with a range of stakeholders. There was Have Your Say. It lasted, I think, from memory, about a 2-month period. Consultation with staff, with various community groups. I think there was drop-in at libraries, suggestions, and Have Your Say. So there's already been extensive consultation in the development of the plan.
Are there any other questions, councillors? Do I have a mover or of the officer's recommendation or something? Councillor Bond, seconder. Councillor Copsey. Councillor Bond.
As a fully paid up member of the Middle Park Library Action Support Group, whatever they were, I've got the T-shirt at home to prove it. I'm pleased to move this and put this out to our community for consultation. I think, as we've already started to hear, there'll be lots of questions on various elements of it, and we certainly look forward to getting the feedback from our community on their thoughts on what we should do going forward with our much loved libraries. So look forward to getting all that feedback.
Councillor Copsey. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Let's put that to the vote then. All those in favour? That's unanimous. The next report that we are looking at is 13.2, which is the Draft Live Music Action Plan. Are there any questions, councillors? If not, do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation? Councillor Bond. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Copsey. Councillor Bond.
Thank you. And this is another one that's going out to consultation with our community on an area that's very important to the City of Port Phillip, in particular St Kilda. Whilst Council plays many roles in this area, I think one of the great aspects of this live music action plan is Council's recognition of its role as the conduit between residents and businesses, in particular live music businesses. And earlier on tonight we heard from some of those residents who live adjacent to a venue where the music is playing rather loudly, according to them. And the onus on resolving that conflict always seems to fall on Council, and that's something that it makes up a big part of Council's role in live music in Port Phillip. Yes, we can be incubators of future musicians, but one of the prime roles for us is being the adjudicator or conduit, the negotiator between residents and venues who have played music for sometimes a very, very long time. And as our neighbourhoods change, our suburbs change, people move in. Sometimes they don't fully appreciate the history of music in the area in which they've chosen to live, and that's fine. But we as a council need to be the ones that can resolve that and can be a part of that discussion and ensure that the right, I guess, planning framework is in place to ensure that our live music venues are not unfairly impacted by residents who have recently moved into an area and perhaps not as accepting of the live music that has been there for many, many years. So I look forward to getting, I'm sure we'll get lots of feedback from that from residents, and I'm sure we'll get some feedback from that from venues also about that role that council plays in the live music scene, which I think is a key to ensuring that we continue to have a live music section here in Port Phillip and in particular St Kilda.
Councillor Copsey.
Thanks. I will quickly speak to this one because it's very close to my heart, and council creativity strategies may not always be perceived as very rock and roll, but I hope that this one is at least a little bit rock and roll, and I just want to really call out that we are seeking feedback on this draft, particularly for people who work in the creative ecosystem and particularly in live music and performance. We want to hear from you what council can do to help support and make sure that live music continues to be a really important part of not just St Kilda, although it's at the absolute heart of St Kilda, but all across Port Phillip. We have fantastic performers and creatives who give so much to our community, not just to the economic outcomes in our city, although that's a huge part of the contribution, but also just making our city what it is. There's been extensive, similarly with the Library Action Plan, there's been extensive consultation with live music operators in forming this draft, so I hope that we've managed to hit some of the marks, and please do engage with this draft and let us know how we've gone so we can keep Port Phillip rocking. Thank you.
Any other councillors like to speak to this motion? I'll just briefly say a few words. You know, I think like the Library Action Plan, the live music action plan, business as usual probably doesn't cut it anymore, and we've got a lot of changing circumstances, changing groups of people, and trying to find the balance that keeps our city vibrant, whether it be live music or libraries, innovative libraries, is what we need to do. So we really are keen to hear the feedback. I'm particularly excited by the looking at the entertainment precincts, which is looking at planning and how it can support what really is the Port Phillip brand, which is creativity, music, arts. So how we keep that vibrant, but also look after our residents and find that balance. So I'm very excited that this is finally, which is another one that got held up because of COVID, is going out to our community. Any other speakers to this motion? Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Item 14.1. Now, this is the proposed discontinuance and sale of roads R3187 and part R4053, which is abutting 454 to 456 City Road, South Melbourne. Are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Copsey. Oh, you're planning to move the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond, you're on fire, the two of you tonight. Councillor Copsey, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Bond. Let's put that... Oh, sorry. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? And I'm forgetting to go back to people. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay, now we've got 14.2, which is the intention to lease part of 69 White Street, South Melbourne. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers on this report? I'm going to ask a question, if I may. Mr. Savinkoff, the question for me is, so this intention to lease is just part of the process, but the actual lease will be decided when the new contract for our procurement process for who would use this space is finalised. Can I just clarify that, please?
Mayor, that's correct. So the winner of the tender for the contract to provide maintenance services to council will have the opportunity as part of their bid to identify the part of the site that they require to provide the service, and the and enter into a lease arrangement as part of their winning of that bid.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for officers? Who's going to put up their hand and move the officer's recommendation? Councillor Bond. Who's going to second for me? Councillor Pearl got in there. Councillor Bond. Councillor Pearl. Anyone else like to speak? Councillor Bond. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is unanimous. 14.3. This is the... Oh, sorry. Oh, you've got a question?
Not a question. I'm sorry I didn't flag this at the start of the meeting. I'm going to absent myself from the chamber. I haven't had a chance to get full advice from governance, but I want to ask a question about whether I potentially have a conflict of interest on this matter. So I'm going to leave the chamber for this item. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Copsey. So as Councillor Copsey, I will just read out the title of the report we're about to consider, which is 14.3, Intention to Sell, 239 to 47 Camden Street, Balaclava. This is the reporting of submissions in response to public notice. Are there any questions for officers? Councillor Martin.
I've only just joined the council, but over the years I've been watching plans develop. I'm not sure how long we've seen plans for those two car parks, but it's certainly been some time. I'm also aware that the In Our Backyard strategy some years ago had as one of its premises that wherever appropriate space came up in the city of Port Phillip, it'd be considered for social housing. Now, I'm also aware that probably the designs that have been through council over the years don't necessarily lend themselves to social housing. So my questions for the council officers: one, is the land that we're talking about suitable for the development of social housing? And if it is, why hasn't council considered the usage of that? And secondly, if not, when the monies are received from that sale and go into council's cash reserves, is there a possibility that some or all of that sum can be quarantined and used to support social housing in the years to come?
Is that Chris Carroll?
Through you, Mayor, I'll answer the second question first, and then I'll defer to Anthony Savinkov to talk about the history of the project and the consideration that we gave to social housing on the site. In terms of the second question, yes, it will be open to council to make a determination about how they would like to use any proceeds from the sale. Our current practice has been to put proceeds of sale of property assets into our reserves, into what we call a strategic property acquisition and development fund, but it would be open to council to determine how it would like to use that, including potentially for contributions towards social housing if determined that was the best course of action.
Anthony Savinkov.
Through you, my Mayor.
I don't know if I'm yawning, but I'll take it. You just made the night. Yes, Mr. Savinkov.
From each property transaction that council contemplates, there's a limited amount of value that we can potentially extract from it. So council's been quite clear in identifying and articulating its objectives for this site, and officers propose to carry out a transaction, if that's what council deems appropriate, in a way that achieves those objectives. Now, there's two key considerations relating to community housing. First, yes, the site can probably accommodate community, and nothing in the proposed transaction would prevent a party purchasing it and developing it for that. I mean, subject to complying with the planning scheme and going through the planning process. Officers also note that in that immediate neighbourhood, just on Marlborough Street, which is a short walk away from this site, quite a significant community housing development is contemplated and is likely to occur in the next year or two.
If I may add to that, I think one of the challenges on the site is to have, given the broader objectives of the structure plan and also what council's determined it would like to achieve from that particular site, and some of the constraints around the car parking, replacement of that car parking, the ability to achieve large-scale social housing while also achieving those broader objectives would be very difficult from a commercial perspective and a value for money perspective. That doesn't discount that there could be some social housing built into a broader design as part of the procurement process.
Through you, Mayor, I just add that we, as part of In Our Backyard, we assessed all council land in the last term, and Chris Carroll's correct. Whilst this could support social housing, it wasn't consistent with the broader objectives of the master plan, and probably not the highest and best use given some of those other objectives. So we can share that assessment with you that was done for the previous council in relation to the fit of this site with the council's In Our Backyard strategy.
Councillor Consolo.
Thank you. In the recommendation, the language is more about a singular submission received. Have there been others received?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there's been interest from several parties in purchasing this site, if it was to come to market, or even before that. However, only one formal submission has been received directly in response to this statutory notice of intention to sell.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, I'd like to follow on from Chris's comments that parking is very difficult in Balaclava, having lived there for a long time, and it is important that we make sure the car parks that will be removed from the development are replicated as part of the new development, if you like. And my question is, the speaker from the public earlier mentioned the Woolworths car park, which is across that road. Is the council considering some form of joint development as well as this? Because it does lend itself to a larger and more complex potential development for the area. Understand that this is council land and that other one is independent, but is there any consideration to working together as per the speaker's comments tonight?
Anthony Sawakoff.
Through you, Mayor, I think tonight was really about hearing the submissions on the notice of intention to sell process. It will provide a detailed briefing to councillors before we move any further, including the background to how we got to here, and potential around how any process or transaction might look going forward. But what I can say is that we have considered a whole range of options, including a package of the development as one package. This is the current path that we're moving down, but we'll provide a detailed briefing to councillors before we go any further, including responding to the submission that was received tonight.
Are there any other questions for officers? As there are none, do I have a mover for the officer's recommendation on alternative? Councillor Bond. Anyone to second? Councillor Pearl. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak to it? Councillor Pearl. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Would you like to close, Councillor Bond? I haven't been doing that all night. Apologies. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Could we please get Councillor Copsey back in? We are now moving to 14.4, which is the appointment of the Audit and Risk Committee Chair for 2021. Councillors, are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Copsey, do you have any questions about the appointment to the Audit and Risk? As there are none, could I get a mover for the officer's recommendation or something else? Councillor Copsey, a seconder. Councillor Pearl, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Copsey.
Just to acknowledge it's a very important position. Thank all of the members of the committee for their hard work in keeping on top of important issues of risk and governance for our city.
Councillor Pearl.
Councillor Sirikoff, you're the second rep on our Audit and Risk? All right, so big thank you needs to go out to the Mayor and Councillor Sirikoff for sitting on the Audit and Risk Committee being led by our new good friend Brian here. So it's a big task, and it's a huge weight of responsibility put on you. So Godspeed for your 12 months on the Audit and Risk Committee, and in advance we greatly appreciate everything you do, because it's a tough job.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? I will briefly just say, yes, it is going to be a big job, but I have every faith that Brian Dempson will do an excellent job. Already after our first meeting, he fills you with much confidence. Councillor Copsey, would you like to close? Let's put that to the vote then, everyone. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. 14.5 is the Procurement Australia contract. Councillors, do we have any questions for the officers? If there are none, do I have a mover for this motion, the officer's recommendation? Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bond. For Councillor Crawford to move, Councillor Bond to second. Would I like to speak to the motion? Not really. This is, this is really just an opportunity to give the council body and the CEO the opportunity to work within this procurement contract, to use it to deliver on the council directions, which we are now working out. So, Councillor Bond, would you like to say something more profound? No. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion, Councillor? Oh.
This is a monster of a contract, right? So in the early part of the last council, we had a similar one. So it's a serious amount of coin going out the door here, but it has been fully considered. There's a slight variance in terms of the competitive tender process, etc., but this was a bulk buy option that was done. Officers have assured us there's value for money in this. Behind the scenes, we've also talked about how efficiencies and reporting of this contract will be done through the CEO report and the annual report potentially, so no need for amendments to the motion here this evening to embed that in, but please don't take the perhaps lack of debate or lack of questioning on the evening here this evening that this hasn't been fully considered. It has been fully considered, and I'm happy to vote for it after reading the report.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? I will quickly close on it just to point out that this is an estimated amount. It's not necessarily a spent amount. It's an amount that we are approving up to. It's only when needed. And I feel sure that the council body will, use it wisely and effectively. And also to note that there is a review coming in as part of a regular process that they do each term to make sure that this is best use and best way that we can procure staff for our organisation. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour? That has passed unanimously. Councillors, that finishes the report section, and we now have notices of motion. So I am bringing a notice of motion, which is 15.1. So I might read that out firstly. So I, Councillor Louise Crawford, give notice that I intend to move the motion at this ordinary meeting of Council. That is that the Council extends formal congratulations to 3 generations of Bunurong women, Nawit Dr Carolyn Briggs AM, her daughter Jara Carolina Steele and granddaughter Amina Jara Briggs, in recognition of their graduating from RMIT University together in December 2020. And part 2 of this motion is respectfully acknowledges and extends appreciation for the contribution each of these women make within the city of Port Phillip and beyond, and the generosity with which they share culture, arts practice and knowledge through their engagement with all of our communities. So I wanted to, before I speak to it, thank you, Councillor Baxter, you're going to second that for me? Great. I wanted to bring this motion tonight to acknowledge it's a pretty amazing feat for 3 generations of any family to graduate, particularly in a year of COVID, from RMIT. Dr Briggs, a Bunurong elder in this area, has worked very closely with the City of Port Phillip over many years to bring the Bunurong culture to the forefront of how Council, or to integrate it into Council, so we consider the long history that came long before the city of Port Phillip existed in this place. So I think it's a pretty profound and wonderful achievement. So I just wanted to put it on public record. It's so impressive, so congratulations. Also to note that Jarrah Steele is our Council Indigenous Arts Officer and has a Masters of Art in Public Space. And Amina Jarrah-Briggs is also an artist and received a Bachelor of Arts Fine Art and is going on to do her honours in Fine Art. What makes... this area is an area of art and culture, so it is even more impressive that those are the areas that you are gaining more knowledge, hopefully to share with us in our community here. But I just think it's one of those achievements that needs to be acknowledged. There's a lot of bad news out there. This is a really great news story. Councillor Baxter.
Oh, probably hard to top that. But I will just say that, Dr. Briggs is such an integral part of this community. I just think that everyone knows her and feels like she's sort of part of our family. So I think that it's very good that we're congratulating her and her family, which feels like our family, for this achievement, and that she'll continue, and her whole family will continue to bring so much to the community they already have.
Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Well, let's put that to the vote then. All those in favour? That's unanimous. So we've got the opportunity now for item 16, reports by council delegates. I know it's early in our term. Was there anyone that would like to briefly speak to any of their delegations? No. All right. Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I just realised I should probably... I'm pretty soon no longer going to be the president of the Association of Bayside Municipalities, so I should probably just give something of a valedictorian to say that over the past 2 years I've represented council on the Association of Bayside Municipalities and also as the president of that body, and I think we've done some really good work working with our fellow councils around the Bay and also with the state government to get some real tangible outcomes. And I don't know whether people noticed there was an Age article last week about the work that councils and state government working together have done in measuring possible sea level rise and other coastal hazards that will have a really huge effect on how we plan it for our communities on the Bay here. So I've been very pleased to lead that coordination effort from the ABM side of things, I won't be recontesting, so that'll be that, but I'll be hanging around and still be council's delegate there, and I hope that we can continue this really good relationship that we've formed with other councils and with state government.
Thank you, Councillor Baxter. We now move to items of urgent business. Councillors, do we have any items to consider? Councillor Bond.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have one item I'd like to consider for urgent business. I wish to raise an item of urgent business relating to sealed container alcohol restrictions.
So, in order to do so, I need a mover and a seconder to
I think I need to speak to it before I get a seconder.
No,
if I'm
I
correct.
believe I need to get a mover and a seconder.
Through you, Mayor, it would be appropriate at this time for Councillor Bond to introduce the need for urgency, and then if you would like to seek a seconder, if Councillor Bond is indeed moving, that Council consider the item.
So you're going to move about the urgency.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So why is this coming to us tonight? If we approve tonight, it will still take somewhere between 7 and 14 days to be gazetted, which means the earliest that this amendment to the schedule to our local law can be implemented is mid-February. If we wait until the next meeting, it will be March at the earliest before this can be gazetted. This is a request arising from a meeting with the local inspector. She indicated that this would be of great assistance to her and her officers. We could do this in 2 weeks, we could do this in 4 weeks, we could do this in 6 months, but the police have requested our assistance now, and it's important that we respond at the earliest opportunity to the police, which I believe is tonight. This isn't a big change. It is closing a loophole, in my opinion, something that we didn't expect to be in the local law but has occurred, and the police have requested assistance with this. I know that some of you don't support the change, but I don't believe that bringing this back in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 months will change those minds. I think some of them are made up tonight, so I ask that we hear this tonight and we don't delay. I mean, earlier tonight we had a number of people come to us pleading for council to take immediate action on hooning. The Speaker stated that the police cannot do their job without help from council, and that is very true. We have an obligation as councillors to help the police, and an expectation from our community that we will do so promptly. We expect that the police respond promptly to our requests to address our issues, such as hooning, as we heard tonight, or amenity issues on Fitzroy Street and Ackland Street. The least we can do as a council is respond to their requests promptly also, and that is what I am hoping to do tonight with this option, with this item. There's no budget implications to what I'm proposing here tonight, so we don't need to delay this until we get costings or officers prepare work. It's quite a straightforward change, so therefore I think it can be done tonight, and the earlier we do it, the police will appreciate that, and we will have acted promptly and responded to their concerns.
Thank
so
you.
Therefore I would like to move that we hear this item of urgent business.
Do I have a seconder for this to be an urgent item of business? Councillor Sirikoff. So thank you. Councillor Bond has moved and Councillor Sirikoff has seconded. Councillor Bond, would you like to speak further to the actual motion itself?
I believe we've got to accept the item of urgent business before I can introduce.
Don't worry about me. Does anyone want to... does anyone speak? Yeah, the procedural motion, yeah, that's what I'm saying. The procedural motion of the urgency, whether it's urgent or not. Councillor Martin.
I'm probably seeking a clarification from the mover and seconder. Looking at my calendar, I'm certainly not looking forward to the Labor Day weekend, because that's probably the next really exciting weekend. I also know that there are members of council who are very supportive in principle of Councillor Bond's principal motion, but who would like a little bit more time to do fine-tuning. I'm wondering if this motion wasn't... Sorry, if the actual major motion itself wasn't debated and voted on until 2 weeks from tonight, is that sufficient time to have things gazetted so we'd have those rulings ready for the Labor Day?
Okay, so could we clarify with officers, is this going to be too late? It's probably an officer question.
Whoever.
I was going to say, I'm happy to have a go. The advice I've been given, it takes 7 to 14 days to gazette an item. So our next council meeting will be 4th, 18th, 3rd, 17th. So that would take us into start of March. So Australia Day weekend was it second weekend of March? You've got to, sell the information. You've got to advise people of the change. So, my opinion, you're cutting it very fine for us to be able to.
And I believe,
sell that.
Mr. Trail, are you coming to add to that clarification?
Through you, Madam Mayor, as per Andrew Bond, it potentially is possible, but it'd be coming out very fine with the gazettal process and the deadlines post the minutes of the next meeting.
Is there anyone who wants to speak to the motion of whether this is urgent item of business or not? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think this is an urgent item. We do not have we do not have a report. We don't have any data to consider. We don't have a request from the police to actually do this. This is this is based off an informal conversation between some councillors and the police. We've received no request. Council has not received a request for this from the police. Now, they may well give us such a request, but we have not actually done it. We've not actually received one. So, and there is certainly there was never any indication either in that conversation or otherwise that there must be a deadline, that if any such changes were made, they must be done by the Labor Day weekend or any other particular date. That's completely arbitrary. There's no indication whatsoever the police are worried that we need to have this in place for a particular date. So I don't see any need for urgency here. We can consider this with a proper report. We can invite the police inspector to come and speak to it, as they have not had the opportunity to come and do so tonight, and we can deal with it then.
Would anyone else like to speak to this procedural motion? No? Well then Councillor Bond, did you want to close on this one?
I clearly sat in a different meeting to Councillor Baxter.
Okay, let's put that to the vote. I know we've closed it. Sorry, too late, Councillor Sirikoff. We're going to the vote. So all those in favour of this urgency motion going ahead? All those against? That motion is lost.
Division required.
All right, we'll vote again. Division required. This time, all those for this being emergency motion going ahead. So it's Councillor Bond, Councillor Sirikoff, Councillor Crawford, Councillor Pearl. All those against? Councillor Baxter, Councillor Consolo, Councillor Copsey, Councillor Martin, Councillor Clark. Again, that motion is lost. So given that has been lost, we are now moving on to confidential matters, which is question 18. We have one item of confidential to consider, provision of landfill services via the Metropolitan Waste and Resource Recovery Group. Now, I need to call upon a councillor to move that this meeting be closed to members of the public so we can consider it. Councillor Pearl, can I have a seconder? Councillor Copsey. Okay, thank you. So that has been moved. Let's put that to the vote. All those in favour of closing the meeting to the public? That is unanimous. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, it's just Teresa. Thank you, Teresa, for coming and visiting us. It's been lovely to see you. It's great to have you back.